Tonight, we are going to walk through the echoes of the Persian Empire, as the Ethiopian Bible remembers them through exile, decrees, royal memory, and the strange mercy of a foreign empire being used inside the story of God, not as a dry timeline, not as a classroom list of kings, but as a night journey through the pages where Persia does not merely stand behind the Bible like scenery. It enters the breathing room of the text. It presses on prayers. It shapes roads, letters, archives, and returning feet. And if you listen carefully, night traveler, you can still hear it there. Before we go any farther, if these slow studies are becoming part of your nights, take a quiet moment to subscribe to Pastor Michael's Rest. It helps you find this kind of peace again the next time the world feels too loud. And if you want to, tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight. Now, come closer. We are about to enter one of the strangest chambers in all of Scripture, the chamber where a world empire becomes an instrument in a sacred story. I have been sitting with these passages again tonight, and what stayed with me was not only the size of Persia, but the softness with which the Bible sometimes lets an empire enter the room. Usually when we hear the word empire, we think first of weight, of soldiers, of taxation, of forced movement, of men whose names are carved into stone, because they wanted the world to remember that they ruled it. And Persia was certainly not small. It stretched over peoples and languages and roads so long that a message could take weeks to fade from one end of its authority to the other. Its kings issued decrees that altered the lives of provinces they would never see with their own eyes. Its scribes copied policy into the nervous system of distant lands. Its treasuries, couriers, archives, palaces, and governors made up one of the great administrative bodies of the ancient world. And yet the Bible does something startling with that largeness. It does not simply tell us that Persia existed. It lets Persia echo. It lets the empire appear in the life of God's people not only as domination, but as atmosphere, as pressure, as corridor, as delay, as permission, as danger, as unexpected mercy moving through a foreign structure. That is why I did not want to call tonight's journey simply the Persian Empire in the Bible. That would be too neat, too museum-like, too easy to hear as information and then leave behind. No, the right word tonight is echoes, because an echo is what remains when the original force has already passed through the room. An echo is sound after power. An echo is the afterlife of a voice. An echo tells you that something large was here, even if it is no longer pressing on you in its first intensity. And Persia in the Bible often sounds like that. Not always front and center, not always loudly explained, but present in return, present in rebuilding, present in fear, present in favor, present in waiting, present in the astonishing fact that God sometimes moves through structures that do not love him, through kings who do not belong to Israel, through paperwork, policy, roads, and sealed records. That is one of the reasons these passages matter to me so much, because many people imagine that if God is really at work, he will act only through obviously holy channels, only through the expected voice, only through the covenant insider, only through the room already marked as sacred. But Scripture is not so timid. Scripture is willing to show us that the Lord of history is still Lord when his people are exhausted, displaced, and living under borrowed skies. The word I want to place gently in your hands at the start of tonight is Peras. Persia. In the old world, this was not merely a map label. It was a governing reality, a political weather system, a structure that could shelter, delay, restrain, fund, interrupt, or reshape ordinary life at a distance. And tonight, that matters, because we are not only asking what Persia did, we are asking what Persia sounded like inside biblical memory. What did it feel like to belong to the people of God while imperial language was being spoken over your roads? What did it mean to remember Zion while edicts were coming from foreign thrones? What happened to prayer when letters, archives, and governors stood between grief and rebuilding? And why did the sacred writers preserve these imperial names so carefully? Cyrus, Darius, Artaxerxes, Ahasuerus. Not because emperors are the center of the story. They are not. But because the story of God's people passed through their shadow, and the shadow mattered. I want to tell this to you tonight the way I first felt it, not as a lecture laid out on a table, but as a long hallway of rooms. In one room, there are tired exiles who have learned how to keep holy memory alive under foreign rule. In another, there is a royal decree that sounds almost too generous to be real. In another, there are counted families, returned vessels, and the ache of starting over among ruins. In another, there are older men weeping because new foundations can awaken old losses. In another, there are accusations, delays, and official letters. In another, there is a search through the imperial archive itself, where a forgotten memorandum waits like a buried lamp inside state memory. And in still another, there is a woman in a Persian palace carrying hidden identity beneath royal textiles and ceremonial silence. That is the path ahead of us tonight. And if we walk it slowly, I think we will discover something that is both historical and deeply human. Empires do not only conquer land, they enter the emotional life of a people. They alter the way generations imagine time. They make obedience feel logistically difficult. They make faithfulness administrative as well as spiritual. They make return depend on roads. They make worship depend, at least for a time, on permissions and interruptions and provincial realities. And yet the biblical witness does not speak of this in a tone of total despair. That is one of the quiet wonders here. The pages do not deny imperial pressure. They simply refuse to grant it final sovereignty. That refusal is one of the holy strengths of these books. Even when a decree matters, the decree is not ultimate. Even when a king is named, the king is not ultimate. Even when archives decide whether rebuilding continues, the archive is not ultimate. History matters. Administration matters. Politics matters. But above them all, quietly and without strain, Scripture keeps insisting that God is still writing a deeper continuity than any empire can fully understand. I think many night travelers need that reminder. Not because we are living in ancient Persia, of course, but because we know what it feels like to live under systems that are larger than our own strength. We know the weariness of paperwork, the slowness of waiting, the anxiety of delays decided in rooms we will never enter. We know what it is to carry private hope while larger powers arrange the public world. And that is why Persia matters tonight. Not as distant trivia, as a mirror of scale, as a reminder that people have always tried to love God while living inside structures they did not design. The Ethiopian Bible remembers this world with remarkable seriousness. It does not flatten the imperial age into a side note. It lets the names of kings stay on the page. It lets return remain difficult. It lets holiness survive in provinces. And tonight I want us to hear those echoes carefully, not hurriedly, not as though we are skimming history for a moral and then moving on. I want us to hear the way empire sounds when it passes through covenant memory. I want us to hear what it does to roads and tears and temple hopes. I want us to hear how foreign authority can become, without understanding it, part of a story it did not write. And I want us to keep one more thing in mind before we leave this opening chamber. Persia was not, in the biblical memory, simply the empire of domination. It became, strangely, the empire of return. Not because it was pure, not because it was holy in itself, not because its kings suddenly became covenant theologians, but because God, who is not trapped by human boundaries, can bend even imperial machinery toward mercy when the hour arrives. That is the wonder waiting ahead of us. A foreign ruler will speak, and weary people will hear in his decree the opening of a road home. A state record will be searched, and buried memory will rise again. A people who learn to pray under displacement will begin, slowly and imperfectly, to rebuild. But before Persia became, for many exiles, the empire of return, it first had to become the empire that held them in its vast provincial hands. And that is where the next chamber begins. Because before we can understand decree, we have to understand distance. Before we can understand restoration, we have to understand how holy memory learns to breathe under empire. There is a kind of sorrow that does not arrive as an explosion. It arrives as arrangement, as administration, as the slow discovery that your holy memories now live under another people's sky. That is the emotional doorway of this second chamber. When we speak about exile, many of us still picture chains, flames, smashed walls, and forced marches. And yes, there was violence before this chapter. There was loss before Persian order ever entered the scene. There was Babylon. There was devastation. There was the long ache of a city remembered more brightly in the heart than it could be seen by the eye. But once the age of Persian rule begins to touch the biblical story, something changes in the feel of exile. The wound remains, yet the wound is now being carried inside a wider, more organized world. The people are no longer only crushed, they are administered, registered, placed in provinces, counted beneath larger systems, and that kind of life shapes the soul differently. The word used in these conversations of return and displacement is often connected to the exilic community itself, the people of the Gola. Exile, captivity, the carried away ones. And the force of that word is not only geographic, it is emotional. To be of the Gola is not merely to live somewhere else. It is to discover that your belonging has been unsettled while your memory remains painfully intact. You know where home is. You remember what worship once sounded like. You remember names, seasons, songs, stories, feast days, promises, but you remember them from somewhere else, and somewhere else changes everything. I have sat with that for longer than I expected to, because exile is not just the pain of loss. It is the pain of continuing, the pain of raising children while carrying older maps in your chest, the pain of speaking of Jerusalem to people who have never seen her, the pain of trying to keep holiness from dissolving into nostalgia. This is why the Persian period cannot be handled as a boring bridge between more dramatic events. It is the age in which memory itself has to learn new muscles. The people of God have to ask whether covenant identity can survive at a distance, whether prayer can remain warm when temple smoke is far away, whether a people can still be a people when empire has rearranged the practical terms of ordinary life. And for many, the answer had to be learned the hard way. Around them was a world of provinces, officials, tax systems, roads, and multilingual bureaucracy. The Persian Empire was large enough that a people could easily feel both noticed and forgotten. Noticed because they were counted within the system. Forgotten because they were only one people among many. That is a particular form of smallness. You are not invisible, but you are not central either. The state knows you exist, but the state does not carry your grief. That distinction matters. Under empire, your sorrow may be administratively acknowledged without being spiritually understood. Your name may exist in a register while your longing remains untranslated. Your road may be known while your tears remain private. And yet, night traveler, this is where something extraordinary begins to happen in the biblical witness. The people do not vanish. They remember. They pray. They teach. They recite. They keep genealogies. They preserve sacred language. They continue to tell one another who they are in the presence of a world large enough to make forgetting seem easier. That perseverance is one of the quiet miracles of the exile. Not that suffering existed. Suffering has existed in every age. The miracle is that memory did not die inside it. The miracle is that covenant speech did not entirely thin out under imperial weather. The miracle is that a people displaced from their center still found ways to orient themselves toward the God who had not ceased to be near. One of the reasons this period feels so human to me is that it does not force us into a false choice. It does not say either God is present or empire is real. It says both. Empire is real. Its roads are real. Its courts are real. Its decrees are real. Its officials can help or hinder. Its scale can exhaust. Its memory can swallow smaller memories if no one resists that forgetting. All of that is real, and God is still present. Not as sentiment, not as denial, as Lord, as the one whose purposes continue through dislocated lives. That combination gives the Persian world in scripture its unusual atmosphere. The age is not one of simple triumph. Neither is it one of total collapse. It is a time of suspended ache, a time when people live between permission and fulfillment, a time when the possibility of return glimmers, but rubble still waits, a time when the empire does not disappear, even when mercy begins to move through it. I think that is one reason these texts can steady people who feel emotionally displaced, because many of us know what it means to live in between. To belong somewhere inwardly that has not yet been fully rebuilt outwardly, to carry promises through structures that do not understand them, to keep an inner altar alive while the visible walls remain broken. This second chamber asks us to imagine families who lived that way for years. What did they sound like at evening? What happened when children asked questions about a place they knew only by story? How often did older people compare the current room to older rooms? How often did prayer become a form of homeland when geography could not yet be recovered? How often did songs carry more than melody because they carried remembered land inside them? Exile is full of those quiet burdens, and Persian order does not erase them. It gives them a new frame. That frame includes provinces. One of the names that matters in this era is Yehud Judah as province, not kingdom, not sovereign center. Province, a reduced political form carrying an unreduced sacred memory. That contrast is one of the key emotional tensions of the age. The people once told stories of Davidic glory, temple splendor, covenant promise, kingship, worship gathered around one holy center. Now, they must learn how to speak faithfully while living under imperial categorization. A province can still be holy ground, but the heart feels the diminishment. This part always makes me slow down, because the Bible is honest enough to preserve not only God's promises, but the smallerness through which those promises were sometimes carried. We are often tempted to think that if God is really moving, the scale will look obviously grand. But Persian period faithfulness is often small in appearance. A remembered genealogy, a preserved vessel, a long road, a decree copied carefully, a name spoken again, a return counted family by family, a foundation laid by hands that still remember another foundation. That is not flashy holiness. It is durable holiness. It is holiness that survives administration. And there is another reason memory becomes so important here. Without memory, empire supplies the whole meaning of reality. Without memory, the road belongs only to the king. The archive belongs only to the state. The language of policy becomes the only language that matters. But the people of God refuse that total surrender. They continue to remember Abraham, Moses, Zion, covenant, temple, promise, mercy. They remember the name above all provincial naming. They remember that though they are placed inside imperial maps, they were not born from imperial imagination. That is one of the deepest acts of spiritual resistance in all of Scripture, to remember rightly while living under an order that is not ultimate. And as Persia emerges in the biblical story, we begin to see that this remembering is not wasted. The God who seemed absent to impatient eyes is not absent. He is preparing a reversal through channels no exile could have guaranteed. A foreign ruler will speak a word that changes the direction of the people. But that word will not matter unless memory has survived long enough to recognize it. That is the hidden dignity of these in-between years. The exiles are not merely waiting. They are carrying forward the inner furniture of a people. They are keeping alive a grammar of belonging sturdy enough to receive mercy when it comes. And mercy, in this story, comes in an astonishing form. Not first in thunder, not first in a prophet toppling a throne, not first in an empire suddenly becoming righteous. It comes first in the name of a king, Cyrus, a foreign sovereign whose decree will sound, to weary ears, almost like a door opening inside history itself. And that is the next chamber. Because once holy memory has learned how to live under empire, the question becomes sharper and stranger. What does it mean when God uses the empire's own mouth to begin a return? If this were a simpler story, Cyrus would remain a political figure only, a capable ruler, a conqueror, a historical hinge in Near Eastern power, the kind of king remembered in textbooks, inscriptions, and state transitions. But the Bible does not leave him there. That is what makes this chamber so astonishing. Cyrus enters sacred memory, not as covenant son, not as Israelite king, not as temple priest, but as a foreign emperor whose decree becomes part of the restoring movement of God. And night traveler, the strangeness of that should not be rushed past, because when we hear these stories too often, we forget how shocking they were at the level of feeling. Try to hear them again with the ears of a displaced people. Try to imagine carrying stories of Zion for years under foreign skies. Try to imagine the ache of remembering the temple while living beneath another administrative order. Try to imagine how impossible restoration might have seemed when the shape of ordinary life had already adjusted to loss. Then, imagine hearing that the ruler of the empire himself has spoken in favor of return. Imagine the stillness in the room. Imagine older faces lifting. Imagine people asking one another to repeat the words again, because sometimes mercy sounds unbelievable the first time it arrives. This is where the old text becomes almost tender in its strangeness. The name Cyrus is not preserved because biblical writers were dazzled by imperial charisma. It is preserved because the God of Israel proved himself sovereign enough to move history through an unexpected vessel. There is a kind of holy mischief in that, a quiet overturning of our assumptions. We expect God to work in clean lines, insider to insider, temple to temple, prophet to priest. But here the line bends outward. It passes through a throne not established for the worship of Israel's God. And yet through that throne comes an opening, a decree, a release, a beginning. The primary text here is Ezra, where the memory of Cyrus is preserved not merely as empire record, but as part of the biblical narrative itself. The king of Persia is named, his proclamation is remembered, the charge concerning the house in Jerusalem is recorded, and the very fact of this preservation tells us something. The sacred writers were not embarrassed to show that God can turn foreign authority toward holy purposes. They did not erase the empire from the story in order to protect a fragile theology. They let the complexity stand. The Lord stirred a pagan king, and the road home began to open. The word I want to place in your hand in this section is this one: proclamation. a royal word sent outward, a decree with reach, an official utterance that alters the practical world. In ordinary imperial logic, a proclamation exists to extend the will of the ruler, but in Ezra's memory, Cyrus's proclamation becomes something more. It becomes a channel through which the purposes of God move in public view, not because Cyrus fully understands the mystery in which he is participating. The text does not require that. What matters is that the decree functions as permission for the rebuilding of what exile had left in ruins. And this is where historical scale becomes deeply human again, because decrees do not return by themselves. Words from kings still have to travel through tired bodies. A proclamation can open a road. It cannot walk it. A decree can authorize restoration. It cannot remove grief from the heart of those who return. A policy can release a people. It cannot instantly rebuild what years of loss have hollowed out. So even in this moment of astonishment, the text remains beautifully realistic. Cyrus matters, but Cyrus is not the end of the story. He is the king whose word reopens movement. He is the imperial hinge. He is the foreign name that becomes inseparable from one of the Bible's great return scenes. But between decree and restoration lies dust, distance, accounting, delay, labor, fear, reconstruction. This balance is one of the things I admire most in these books. They allow amazement without fantasy. Yes, a great empire has spoken unexpectedly in favor of return. Yes, a door has opened. Yes, the moment deserves wonder. But the people still have to become a returning people in practice. That means lists. That means names. That means vessels. That means roads and provinces and long obedience after the thrill of announcement fades. And that realism is a gift. Because otherwise, we might misunderstand what mercy often looks like in history. Mercy is not always immediate completion. Sometimes mercy is a permission, a release, a legal opening, a ruler's decision that allows the wounded to begin walking. Sometimes that is how God starts restoration, not by skipping all process, but by changing the conditions in which process becomes possible. I think many listeners need that reminder, because sometimes we wait for God to do the final thing in one instant, and meanwhile we fail to recognize the holy importance of an open door. A door is not the whole house, but if the door had remained shut, the house could never be reached. Cyrus, in this sense, is a king of the opened door, and the text lets that stand. There is another reason this chamber matters. It forces us to think more deeply about sovereignty. If God is only sovereign in explicitly religious spaces, then empire belongs to somebody else. Then history is divided into zones, holy zones where God acts, and political zones where other powers rule. But Ezra refuses that division. The decree of Cyrus does not mean Persia has become the kingdom of God. It means Persia was never outside the range of God's government to begin with. That is a stronger claim, a deeper one, and it is one the text does not shout. It simply demonstrates it. The empire issues its word, and hidden inside that imperial movement is divine intention. This is one of those places where I always feel scripture becoming both larger and quieter at the same time. Larger because history opens wide. Quieter because the Lord does not need noise to prove that he rules it. The king speaks. The page records. The road begins. That is enough. Cyrus also matters because his presence preserves the moral complexity of history. Foreign rulers are not all the same. Empires are not all remembered in a single tone. The Bible is not careless with nuance here. Babylon burns in memory differently. Persia sounds different. Not innocent, not idealized, but different. The Persian age becomes, in part, the age in which a conquered people are permitted to move toward rebuilding. Persia leaves multiple sounds in the biblical chamber. The sound of administration, the sound of imperial naming, the sound of roads and letters, the sound of palace risk, the sound of prophetic endurance, and here, in Cyrus, the sound of astonishing permission. The word used here is Cyrus. In the Hebrew text, the name arrives not as legend, but as history spoken aloud within sacred narrative. For the returning community, that mattered, because this was not abstract hope. It was the name attached to the opening they could actually walk through. And tonight it matters because many weary people need to remember that God can move through public structures without first asking those structures to become pure enough for Him to use. And I will tell you honestly, I have sat with that line longer than I expected to, because it rescues providence from our small expectations. There is another layer to this. The memory of Cyrus does not remain trapped in one verse. It spills outward. It means temple vessels can be spoken of again. It means family lines can become return lines. It means Jerusalem can move from remembered ruin toward inhabited responsibility. It means that an imperial center far away can affect prayer at the edges. And this too is part of the tenderness of the story. God does not restore in abstractions. He restores through names, routes, notices, measures, official words, and counted belongings. He restores by touching the material terms through which life must actually be lived. That is why the return books feel so concrete. Their holiness is not decorative. It is logistical. It has to do with who may go, what may be carried, which vessels are returned, where the people gather, what gets rebuilt first, and how long the process takes. To many modern readers, that can seem dull. But to anyone who has ever waited for life to begin again, such details are anything but dull. They are the grammar of restoration. They are the proof that mercy has entered the world in a form sturdy enough to touch actual life. If I may say it this way, the decree of Cyrus is moving not only through politics, but through tired human nerves, through people who have known suspension, through people who are afraid to hope too quickly, through people who have lived so long with displacement that even good news may feel fragile in their hands. And that is one reason the text feels spiritually truthful. It does not portray the exiles as naive celebrants intoxicated by imperial favor. It portrays a people who must become capable of return. That takes courage. It takes organization. It takes memory. It takes willingness to leave what had become familiar in order to move toward what is still broken. That is no small thing. There is a kind of bravery hidden in every true return. Not only the bravery to leave captivity, the bravery to begin again. And Cyrus's decree, for all its greatness, does not remove that burden. It places it before the people as possibility. Go up, build, carry, return. These are beautiful words. They are also demanding words, because every return asks a people to accept that the home they love now exists in partial ruin and must be served before it can be admired. That is the next movement in our journey. The empire has spoken. The road is opening, but a decree on paper is not yet a road walked by tired feet. And in the next chamber we will leave the throne room and enter the long practical mercy of return itself. Counted families, restored vessels, dust, distance, fear, obedience, and the first difficult steps toward Jerusalem. The empire has spoken. The decree is no longer only an imperial sound inside a palace chamber. Now it becomes weight in human hands. It becomes bundles. It becomes ledgers. It becomes memory tied to movement. It becomes people deciding whether hope is solid enough to travel with. That is where this fourth chamber begins, night traveler. Not with a trumpet, not with a fantasy of instant restoration, but with the hard and beautiful humility of counted feet moving toward a broken city. One of the holiest details in the return narratives is also one of the easiest to rush past. The text counts. It counts families. It counts servants. It counts singers. It counts animals. It counts vessels. It counts what can be carried, because restoration, when it finally comes near enough to touch, almost always enters through particulars. Grand speeches may open a door, but communities are rebuilt by names, households, inventory, and patient motion. This is why Ezra can feel so strange to modern ears. We are often trained to love inspiration and to skip enumeration. We want the shining decree, the cinematic return, the triumphant music. But Scripture slows us down. It makes us look at lists. And by forcing us to look at lists, it quietly asks whether we actually understand what mercy looks like once it enters ordinary life. Because mercy, in these pages, is not vapor. It is counted existence. It is the right to be named again as a people who are going somewhere together. The names matter because exile had scattered identity across distance. Under empire, it is possible to survive and still begin to lose shape, to become merely one provincial cluster among many, to become a tolerated minority with inherited memories but weakened public form. So when the text begins to gather the returning community through names and lines and numbers, something more than administration is happening. A people is being reassembled in public memory, and that is deeply tender. Not sentimental, tender. The kind of tenderness that knows restoration must become visible if it is to be lived. Here we meet figures like Sheshbazzar and Zerubbabel, names that do not always receive the emotional attention given to kings or prophets, yet they stand in the doorway of return, like men carrying responsibility heavier than personal ambition. Sheshbazzar appears in the early edge of the return story as a prince of Judah, entrusted with temple vessels and linked to the first movement home. Zerubbabel emerges as another crucial steward of return, a leader whose very presence reminds us that the Davidic memory has not vanished, even if the throne has. And beside him stands Jeshua, or Joshua, the priestly figure whose role makes clear that return is not only political relocation, it is liturgical recovery. The people are not merely trying to inhabit land again. They are trying to become a worshiping people again. That distinction matters. Many communities know how to survive displacement economically. Far fewer know how to remain spiritually coherent inside it. The return books are not only about geography. They are about the difficult rejoining of place, memory, sacrifice, priesthood, and communal obedience. I want to pause over one old phrase here, because it belongs in this chamber like a lamp placed low on stone. Gola. The exiled community, the carried away ones. That word does not disappear just because a decree has been spoken. A decree can authorize movement. It cannot erase what displacement has done to the inner life. These are still the people of the Gola, even as they begin to return. And perhaps that is why the narrative feels so honest. The Bible does not pretend that permission ends sorrow. It does not pretend that one imperial document can undo years of distance. The carried away ones remain the carried away ones while they walk toward mercy. This is often how God deals with us. He does not always heal us by first removing every trace of the season we survived. Sometimes He leads us forward while the old name is still clinging to us, not to humiliate us, to prove that His guidance is strong enough to work even before we feel fully restored. And then there are the vessels. I love this part of the story more every time I return to it. The temple vessels, once taken by Nebuchadnezzar, and absorbed into the humiliation of conquest, are brought back into the narrative under Cyrus's permission. Gold basins, silver basins, censers, bowls, objects once seized as trophies now become signs of remembered holiness. If you listen carefully, the return of the vessels is not a decorative detail. It is theology in metal. It says that what was profaned has not been forgotten. It says that sacred things may pass through foreign treasuries without losing the claim of the God to whom they belong. It says that empire can store what it does not understand, but it cannot finally redefine what God has marked for himself. And perhaps, night traveler, there is comfort in that beyond the page. Many people know what it is to feel that parts of life were taken into a foreign treasury. Years were absorbed. Strength was consumed. Attention was seized by systems that did not love the soul. Yet here in this old chamber, the scriptural memory whispers that stolen things are not always lost things. The Lord who remembers vessels can remember the scattered parts of a human life too. Not cheaply, not instantly, but truly. The lists continue. 2,000 this, hundreds that, sons of one house, sons of another, temple servants, singers, gatekeepers, livestock counted beside human households. To hurry past this is to miss the kind of God these books reveal. He is not embarrassed by detail. He is not impatient with the infrastructure of restoration. He does not only hover over mountain peaks and prophetic flames. He also attends to return routes, transport burdens, and the shape of a remnant becoming communal again. That word remnant belongs here as well. A remnant is not the whole cloth. It is what remains after tearing, after fire, after judgment, after scattering. And yet the biblical imagination is never ashamed to hope through remnants. The Persian period makes this especially clear. The people who return are not a glorious majority sweeping back in visible triumph. They are smaller than memory, more vulnerable than former generations, burdened with old grief and new responsibility. Still, they return. This is one of the quiet miracles of the chapter. Not only that, a king allowed it, that a people accepted the cost of obedience. Because return has costs. We speak warmly of going home, but real return is not merely emotional. It is costly in body, schedule, economics, safety, and imagination. Those who stayed behind in Babylon or elsewhere were not necessarily faithless. Some had roots now, some had businesses. Some had children who knew that landscape better than Jerusalem. Some were too tired. Some were too uncertain. Some may have loved the memory of Zion, while no longer feeling able to gamble their stability upon its stones. So every family that joins this road is not only responding to a king, it is consenting to uncertainty. That makes the journey spiritually weighty. It is an act of trust performed without the guarantee of comfort, and every true act of return still feels like that. What deepens the beauty of this chamber is that the text does not stage the return as private heroism. It is communal. Households rise together. Genealogies matter. Belonging matters. The memory of fathers matters. The place of singers matters. The priestly register matters. Even the painful moment when some cannot fully prove their ancestry matters, because it reveals how fragile continuity can become under the long pressure of exile. Some records are unclear, some lines have blurred, some claims must wait. That too is truthful. Displacement does not only damage buildings, it damages archives. It complicates inheritance. It makes certainty harder to recover. And yet the community continues. They do not abandon restoration simply because some details remain unresolved. They proceed with reverence, with caution, with the painful humility of a people rebuilding under partial knowledge There is wisdom in that. A lesser story would have hidden the ambiguities. Scripture leaves them on the table. A people may still be God's people while carrying administrative uncertainty. A return may still be faithful while requiring patient discernment. And I think many listeners need that tonight. You may be moving toward something right and still feel that not every inner paper has been sorted. You may be walking toward obedience while portions of your history remain hard to classify. Do not mistake that unfinishedness for abandonment. In this Persian chamber, God works with communities who know what it is to travel with both conviction and incompleteness. The return road is also physical. That should not be forgotten. Dust rises. Children tire. Animals must be managed. Possessions must be secured. Water must be found. Threats remain possible. The old dream of Jerusalem has to pass through long miles before it becomes sight. The Bible does not narrate every step, but the weight of the journey rests quietly behind the lines. Return is not teleportation. It is weariness in motion. And perhaps this is why I have come to trust these books. They understand that redemption often advances at the speed of caravans, not at the speed of wishful thought, not at the speed of desperate prayer alone. Prayer matters. Decree matters. Providence matters. But roads still take time. The people finally arrive, and the text does something profoundly human. It tells us they gather in their cities. That sentence may sound small, but it holds a whole emotional world. To gather again, to settle again, to inhabit inherited space after generations of rupture, to stand not as tourists to grief, but as participants in continuity. There is mercy in that, a modest mercy, a practical mercy, the kind that does not shout, but steadies the chest. And then another layer appears. Resources are voluntarily given. Heads of families offer according to ability. Treasures are gathered for the house of God. This matters because restoration is not outsourced entirely to empire. Cyrus may permit. Persia may facilitate, but the people themselves must contribute. Holy rebuilding requires communal sacrifice. No empire, however useful, can do the worshiping for them. This is an important boundary in the theology of Persia. The empire can open a road. It cannot become the covenant people. It can underwrite a moment. It cannot replace devotion. It can carry the echo of providence. It cannot become the source of holiness. That keeps the story honest, and it protects us from sentimentalizing political favor. Foreign rulers may be used by God. They are never the center of the faith. The center remains the Lord and the community summoned to answer him. By now, perhaps, you can feel what this chamber is preparing us for. A people has been counted. A road has been walked. Sacred vessels have reappeared. Cities have begun to fill again. But return is not completion. The land is not healed simply because feet have touched it. The ache of ruin still waits. And if the people are truly to become themselves again, the question cannot stop at residence. It must move toward worship. What is rebuilt first reveals what a people most deeply believes it cannot live without. There is another mercy hidden in the counting, and I do not want us to miss it. The singers are named with the workers. The servants are remembered with the leaders. Even animals are counted beside households. In other words, the return is not narrated as though only the visibly important mattered. Song matters. Service matters. Transport matters. Ordinary support matters. A holy people is never rebuilt by famous figures alone. It is rebuilt by the entire woven body of those who carry, guard, prepare, remember, labor, and keep pace together. That is worth saying aloud in an age that loves platforms more than faithfulness. The biblical return narratives love infrastructure because God loves whole communities, and whole communities include the uncelebrated. Perhaps that is why these lists lower the pulse. instead of raising it. They remind us that sacred history is not sustained by spectacle alone. It is sustained by people who show up with names, family memory, and enough obedience for the next mile. That steadies me. It tells me the Lord who watched over exiles also watched over pack animals, temple singers, and the tired heads of households trying to keep children moving toward a city they knew mostly by inherited ache. Such detail is not clutter. It is compassion written in administrative form, and once you hear it that way, the long road feels less like a census and more like a shepherded procession, imperfect, vulnerable, and deeply seen by God. And maybe that is why the road feels holier than we expect. It is not only taking people back to Jerusalem, it is teaching them, step by step, that God does not merely restore places. He restores public belonging. He restores shared memory. He restores the courage to travel together again beneath his patient watch, even after long years of imperial displacement and borrowed horizons for them. That is why the next chamber matters so much. Because before the walls rise high, before the city feels secure, before the full structure of the temple stands in visible strength, the people will do something that reveals the priority of their hearts. They will gather around the altar, and in that choice there is fear, obedience, memory, and one of the most beautiful acts of vulnerable worship in the whole return story. When the returning community reaches the land, they do not arrive in a world already prepared to comfort them. That would have been easier. That would have made a simpler story. But Scripture is too honest for that. The city they love is still marked by loss. The temple that defined the center of communal worship is not standing in its former glory. The old security is not waiting at the gate to welcome them home, and the peoples around them are not arranged in neat silence, ready to applaud sacred reconstruction. So the question becomes urgent. What do you rebuild first when your life has come out of ruin but has not yet entered stability? The answer given by Ezra is the altar. Not first the wall, not first the houses, not first the optics of visible strength. The altar, that detail has pierced me more than once, because it reveals what the return community understood about survival. They did not believe they could wait for ideal conditions before restoring worship. They understood that if God had brought them this far, then the first necessity was not image management, but reconsecration. The altar is where dependence becomes public. It is where covenant memory is enacted rather than merely admired. It is where thanksgiving, fear, obedience, and need are laid before God in a form the body can perform. The text even tells us something else that makes the moment more powerful. They set the altar in place because fear was upon them because of the peoples of the lands. Do not miss that. The altar is not raised after fear disappears. It is raised in the presence of fear. This may be one of the most pastorally important details in the entire Persian return narrative. Many people assume obedience begins once anxiety has left the room, but biblical obedience often begins while fear is still breathing nearby. The people do not deny the tension. They do not pretend the environment is safe. They do not wait until all opposition has been analyzed and neutralized. They build the altar anyway. That is not recklessness. It is theological clarity. They know that if they are to remain a people under God, worship cannot be postponed until the world feels manageable. There is an old covenant gravity in this scene. Burnt offerings are resumed. Morning and evening rhythms are restored. The appointed feasts begin again. The Feast of Booths is observed. Prescribed offerings return according to what was written. This phrase matters as it is written. The return is not merely emotional religion. It is patterned obedience. A community formed by exile now seeks to be formed again by commanded worship. That movement from improvisation to scriptural pattern is one of the strongest signs that true restoration is underway. Anyone can feel spiritual for a moment. A restored people learns again how to obey in sequence. And yet the mood is not triumphalist. The altar stands before the house is complete. Imagine the emotional contradiction of that. The center of sacrifice is functioning while the grand structure that once held national memory still lies in incompleteness. Worship is present, but visible fullness is absent. Perhaps that is why this moment feels so close to real life. How many faithful seasons contain exactly this tension? The altar is there. God is being honored. The essential thing has begun again. And yet much around it still looks unfinished. The soul wants completion. God sometimes gives order before completion. The soul wants visible restoration. God sometimes gives obedient beginnings. The soul wants the walls first, because walls feel safer. God receives the altar first, because worship tells the truth about dependence. This scene also holds one of the great invisible lessons of the Persian period. The people are back, but they are not sovereign. They remain a small community within a vast imperial arrangement. Even their rebuilding unfolds under permission, scrutiny, and provincial complexity. So when they establish the altar, they are not declaring political domination. They are declaring covenant allegiance inside limitation. That is a very different kind of strength, and perhaps a purer one. Many forms of religion feel powerful only when attached to public control. But the return community teaches a quieter lesson. A people may be politically modest, socially exposed, economically constrained, and still capable of sturdy worship. That is not glamorous. It is holy. Jeshua the priest stands here again, alongside Zerubbabel and the heads of fathers' houses. Priesthood, leadership, household memory, and written command all converge around sacrificial order. This convergence matters. It means worship is not being restored as private mysticism. It is communal, inherited, embodied, and text-shaped. That combination is part of what gives the Persian restoration books their moral density. Everything is concrete. Everything touches life. Even piety has weight. Wood must be acquired. Masons and carpenters must be engaged. Sidonian and Tyrian cedar must be arranged, echoing older patterns of temple construction, and reminding the listener that restoration often comes by retrieving faithful forms rather than inventing spectacle. There is beauty in that humility. The people do not need novelty to prove life has returned. They need faithfulness. They need materials. They need sequence. They need enough courage to do the next commanded thing. Then comes the laying of the foundation. And now one of the most emotionally complex scenes in Ezra opens before us. Priests in vestments, trumpets, Levites with cymbals, praise according to the directions linked to David, King of Israel. The public sound of thanksgiving rises, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever toward Israel. The people shout with a great shout when the foundation is laid, but the text will not let the moment become simple. Many of the older priests, Levites, and heads of fathers' houses, the men who had seen the first house, weep with a loud voice when this foundation appears. At the same time, many shout aloud for joy, so the sound cannot be distinguished. Joy and grief mingle until the ear can no longer separate them. This may be one of the most truthful verses in all of post-exilic scripture, because genuine restoration almost never sounds like pure celebration. Those who remember what was lost do not hear new beginnings the same way as those who know them only as hope. The young may rejoice because a future is opening. The old may weep because comparison is unavoidable. Both responses can exist in the same faithful assembly, and the Bible honors both. That tenderness matters greatly. The text does not rebuke the elders for weeping, nor does it shame the rejoicing voices for their gladness. It simply tells the truth. Restoration carries mixed sound. If you have ever stood inside a new season and found yourself grateful and grieving at the same time, this chamber understands you. It understands that beginning again is not emotionally tidy. It understands that covenant hope can coexist with historical ache. It understands that the heart can bless God for what is being rebuilt while still mourning the scale of what has been ruined. This is not unbelief. It is mature memory. The Persian period is full of such complexity. That is why it should never be preached merely as cheerful recovery. It is recovery under pressure, recovery through tears, recovery with provincial vulnerability, recovery with inherited loss still audible in the room, and still it is real recovery. That is what makes it sacred. Then opposition enters more clearly. The adversaries of Judah and Benjamin hear that the returned exiles are building a temple to the Lord, the God of Israel. They approach Zerubbabel and the heads of fathers' houses with an offer that sounds cooperative. "Let us build with you," they say, "for we seek your God as you do, and we have been sacrificing to him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria." But the leadership refuses. "You have nothing to do with us in building a house to our God." That response can sound harsh to modern ears, yet inside the theology of the return, it marks a boundary essential to covenant integrity. Not every offered alliance is faithful partnership. Not every shared religious vocabulary reveals obedient worship. A people restored by mercy must still discern mixture. This is one of the dangers of rebuilding under empire. The longing for safety can make compromise feel sensible. The longing for speed can make dilution feel practical. The longing for broader acceptance can make spiritual clarity feel impolite. But the return leaders understand something difficult and necessary. The house they are rebuilding cannot be founded on blurred allegiance. It is not xenophobic panic driving the refusal. It is covenant definition. And whenever a people has survived judgment and exile, definition matters. The response from the surrounding peoples then hardens into discouragement. They weaken the hands of the people of Judah. They trouble them in building. They bribe counselors against them to frustrate their purpose. How familiar that feels. Not every attack on a holy work arrives as open violence. Sometimes it comes as fatigue, as bureaucratic interference, as social pressure, as long discouragement spread across months and years until enthusiasm begins to fray. This is one reason the Persian material is so spiritually usable. It knows that the enemy of restoration often prefers attrition to drama. Wear them down, complicate the process, cloud the future, make the work seem too difficult to sustain. And yet the story does not end there. It waits, it grieves, it slows, but it does not die. That waiting is part of this chamber's burden. The altar stands. The foundation has been laid. Joy and sorrow have mingled. Opposition has begun to exert pressure. The work does not proceed in a straight line from emotion to completion. It enters interruption. That interruption is important because it protects us from romanticizing obedience. Faithful beginnings do not guarantee unresisted progress. A true altar may still stand in a season of stalled walls. A real foundation may remain visible, while the larger work pauses under pressure. And this does not mean the original act of obedience was false. It means history is thick. It means God's work often unfolds through contested time. It means the people must learn perseverance as well as praise. There is one more layer to the altar scene that deserves to be spoken slowly. An altar without a completed house can feel exposed. Fire rises into open air. The act of worship is visible. The people are not hidden inside finished architecture. They are, in a sense, offering themselves before the watching landscape. That vulnerability matters. It means worship is not sheltered by success. It is offered before success. The community is saying, in effect, that God is worthy before the project looks impressive. God is worthy before surrounding opinion changes. God is worthy while the future remains materially uncertain. That kind of worship has unusual purity in it, and the mixed sound at the foundation deepens the lesson. Loud joy and loud weeping become one indistinguishable cry. I have often thought that heaven may receive such blended sound with special tenderness, not because confusion is ideal, but because honest worship rarely arrives in a single emotional color. Some voices thank God for what is beginning. Some voices mourn what memory cannot stop comparing. Some voices barely know which feeling is governing them. Yet they stand in the same assembly. They face the same direction. They remain under the same covenant mercy. That is no small miracle. This is why the Persian restoration books should be read by anyone tempted to despise small beginnings. The altar says that beginnings matter. The foundation says that incomplete beginnings still matter. The tears say that grief inside obedience still matters. The joy says that hope has not surrendered. Put them together, and you have a portrait of spiritual resilience more believable than any polished success story. The people do not possess visible greatness yet, but they do possess a center. They know where sacrifice belongs. They know where praise belongs. They know where the first stones must lie. In seasons when life feels fragmentary, that kind of centeredness may be the most merciful gift of all. Let me say it another way, night traveler. The altar before the walls means the people chose presence before protection. They chose covenant before comfort. They chose sacrifice before scenery. That order is not accidental. It is spiritual wisdom. A community can survive with unfinished architecture longer than it can survive with forgotten worship. Once the altar burns again, identity begins to gather around the fire of obedience. Once praise rises again, fear no longer has the only voice in the land. Once sacrifice resumes, the people are no longer merely returnees from Babylon. They are Israel. Trembling perhaps, limited certainly, but facing God again where it matters most. That is why this scene keeps its power. It shows us the first strong heartbeat of a people becoming themselves under mercy, and then the stones themselves begin to preach. We did not come back merely to stand on old ground. We came back to face the God who kept us alive through judgment, distance, memory, and astonishing mercy. The next chamber will take us deeper into that contested time, because Persia is not only the empire that permits return, it is also the empire of archives, correspondence, governors, accusations, and searched records. The holy future of Jerusalem will have to pass through official memory once more. And when it does, one of the most astonishing scenes in the entire restoration story will appear: a buried decree remembered, a king listening, and imperial power unexpectedly defending the very work others tried to stop. There is a special kind of suspense that belongs only to written things. A word can be spoken and lost to the air. A gesture can be made and fade with the body that made it. But once a decree enters an archive, it waits in another way. It sleeps on shelves. It survives the moods of the moment. It sits beneath dust, seal, and storage until a later hour calls it back to speech. That is the chamber we enter now, and it is one of the most beautiful Persian chambers in the Bible because it reveals how providence may hide inside record-keeping. The rebuilding work has not flowed forward without resistance. Tatnai, governor of the province beyond the river, along with Shetharboznai and their associates, comes near the work and asks the returning builders a series of administrative questions. Who gave you a decree to build this house and to finish this structure? What are the names of the men who are building this building? These are not warm devotional questions. They are oversight questions. Questions of authorization. Questions asked by men who know how empire functions. And yet the text tells us something vital in the middle of this pressure. The eye of their God was upon the elders of the Jews. That sentence is one of the great quiet jewels of Ezra. No trumpet, no thunder, no immediate miracle splitting the sky. Just a line placed inside bureaucratic scrutiny like a hidden flame. The eye of their God was upon them. This is not sentimental language. It is covenant steadiness. It means the builders are not invisible while officials inspect them. It means heaven has not looked away simply because the matter now involves paperwork. It means divine attention is not interrupted by administrative process. Many people can believe God is present in worship. Fewer remember that He is also present in the hearing room, the letter, the review, the delay, the request for proof. But this Persian text insists upon it. The eye of God can remain upon His servants while they answer provincial questions. Tatanai does something important next. He does not simply crush the work on impulse. He writes. He sends a report to Darius. He includes the claims of the Jewish elders, including the memory that a great king of Israel had built the former house, that it had been destroyed because of the people's sins, and that Cyrus, king of Babylon, or more exactly, king over the realm that had absorbed Babylon, had issued a decree concerning its rebuilding. Notice what is happening. Holy history is being summarized inside imperial correspondence. Sin, judgment, temple destruction, Cyrus's decree, returned vessels. Everything is moving through official channels. That intersection fascinates me. The Bible is not embarrassed to show sacred memory traveling through secular forms. The elders do not refuse documentation as though faith and evidence were enemies. They testify. They appeal to what was written. They understand that if the empire lives by archives, then the truth of the moment may have to be vindicated by an older imperial memory. Here is the NIG fact for this chamber, and it is one of my favorites in the whole Persian world. The name, Ekbatana, matters. In the Aramaic and wider ancient setting, it refers to the Median Royal Center, also known in older forms as Akhmetha. Historically, it functioned as one of the great administrative and seasonal capitals of the empire, a place where records and royal business could be preserved among the highland structures of imperial order. Modern listeners may hear only an unfamiliar city name, but its relevance is immediate. It reminds us that decisive answers are often sitting in places we have never seen, inside systems larger than our personal horizon. And I love that, because Pastor Michael has spent enough nights with weary people to know how often life feels suspended while the needed answer seems hidden in some distant chamber we cannot reach. Yet in Ezra, even a distant archive can become a servant of mercy when the hour comes. Darius receives the inquiry. A search is made, not merely in passing, not carelessly, a real imperial search. The story slows to make us feel the gravity of this. If the record is found, the work may stand. If the record is not found, opposition could gain lawful force. You can almost hear the silence around that waiting. Workers still near the unfinished structure. Leaders carrying memory as testimony. Officials moving through channels. And somewhere, perhaps far from Jerusalem's dust, attendants unrolling stored documents under the authority of a king. Then, the archive answers. In Ekbatana, in the citadel, a scroll is found, and there it is. The memorandum, the decree of Cyrus concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Dimensions, materials, costs, returned vessels. The earlier word has not evaporated. Power had written, and the archive remembered. I do not think it is excessive to call this one of the most quietly thrilling moments in Scripture, because it reveals something about providence that many modern hearts badly need. God does not only work through fresh interventions. Sometimes He works by preserving old words until the exact season when those words must rise again and defend the future. That is a different kind of miracle, a documentary miracle, a memorandum miracle, a mercy hidden in storage. And it does not end with discovery. Darius responds with forceful support. He commands Tatanai and the other officials to keep away from the work. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews rebuild this house of God on its site. More than that, he orders that the cost be paid to these men in full and without delay from the royal revenue, the tribute of the province beyond the river. Then more still, whatever is needed, bulls, rams, sheep, wheat, salt, wine, oil is to be given day by day without fail for the offerings of the God of heaven, so that prayers may be offered for the life of the king and his sons. Pause there with me. This is astonishing. Imperial machinery has moved from scrutiny to subsidy, from questioning the project to financing its continuation, from possible obstruction to formal protection. And all of it turns on a recovered decree. The archive has become an ally to the holy work because truth, once buried, was not erased. There is deep comfort in that. Not shallow comfort. Deep comfort. The kind that does not promise every struggle will be quickly solved, but does insist that forgotten truth is not therefore dead truth. How many people live as though whatever is currently loud must finally decide the future? Ezra will not let us believe that. A later accusation is not always stronger than an earlier faithful word. A present official may not outrank a preserved decree. A visible delay may not mean the story has lost its legal or moral foundation. Something written in a former season may still be waiting to vindicate the work of God. There is even judgment attached to Darius's response. Anyone who alters this edict is threatened with severe penalty. A beam is to be pulled from his house. He is to be impaled on it. His house is to be made a dunghill. This is Persian severity, and we need not romanticize it. Empire still sounds like empire here. Yet the severity itself now protects the rebuilding, rather than suppressing it. That reversal matters. The imperial sword has not become holy, but it has become, for a moment, a boundary around the work God means to complete. This is one more reason the Persian chapters are morally complex and worth lingering in. God's providence does not flatten the empire into innocence. He uses it without endorsing all that it is. He bends policy toward mercy without baptizing the whole political order. That distinction keeps the theology clean. The elders continue building, and the text adds another layer we must not miss. They prosper through the prophesying of Haggai and Zechariah the son of Iddo. There it is again, the double texture of restoration. Imperial decree matters. Prophetic voice matters. Archive and oracle. Revenue and revelation. Written authorization and living exhortation. The people need both. If you remove the prophetic dimension, the story becomes mere administration. If you remove the administrative dimension, the story becomes detached spirituality. Scripture holds them together. God strengthens His people through prophets, while also clearing the public road through decrees. That combination is one of the signatures of the Persian period, and the house is finished. Finished according to the command of the God of Israel, and by decree of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. Notice the ordering. The command of God first, the decrees of kings beneath it. This is the hierarchy that must govern our reading. Persia matters greatly, but Persia is not ultimate. The king's sign what heaven has already permitted. They accelerate what divine purpose has already decided. They become instruments in a larger music, never the composer. Then comes dedication, joy, sacrifice, appointment of priests and Levites according to what is written in the book of Moses, and then Passover, cleanliness, separation from impurity, feasting because the Lord had made them joyful and had turned the heart of the king of Assyria to them, which in context gestures across imperial succession and reminds us that the great empires of the region may shift names, but the Lord remains sovereign over all of them. The return story has moved from decree to road, from road to altar, from altar to opposition, from opposition to archive, from archive to finished house. But the Persian echo is not finished yet, not even close. Because the empire will keep pressing on the biblical pages through Esther's peril, Ezra's reforming grief, Nehemiah's dangerous service, and the strange long shadow of life under kings who are near enough to affect everything and yet far enough to remain surrounded by distance and unpredictability. And notice how the searched decree does more than settle a dispute. It restores public legitimacy to a people who might otherwise have remained permanently vulnerable to every fresh accusation. That matters because long seasons of interruption can slowly teach a community to expect obstruction as its natural climate. When that happens, courage begins to shrink. Imagination narrows. People stop planning boldly because they assume the next letter, the next official, the next complaint will close the road again. But when Darius confirms the decree, the atmosphere changes. Permission hardens into protected mandate. The work is no longer merely tolerated. It is ordered to continue. There is also something profoundly instructive in the fact that the builders answered the questions truthfully before the archive vindicated them. They did not invent a stronger story. They did not flatter the officials with theological vagueness. They spoke plainly about the sins that had led to judgment, the destruction of the house, the action of Cyrus, and the return of the vessels. Honest testimony comes before favorable outcome. That sequence is morally beautiful. It means the people are not trying to manipulate providence. They are trying to bear witness within it. And once the decree is recovered, the generosity of the imperial order becomes almost startling. Daily provisions for sacrifice, financial support without delay, protection from interference. The God of heaven is named in the royal response because even empire can learn to speak reverently when divine providence rearranges the room. Not perfectly, not as covenant faith, but reverently enough to acknowledge that this house concerns a God whose favor is not trivial. This is why the Persian archive scene should never be read as mere historical curiosity. It is a chamber of delayed confirmation. It teaches the weary soul that silence is not the same as absence, and storage is not the same as erasure. Some truths are not dead. They are simply waiting for the right king, the right inquiry, the right shelf, the right hour, and the right opening of the scroll. When that hour comes, what looked buried may suddenly become the very thing that guards the unfinished work. I think of the man on the ground, hearing later that the answer had been found in a distant citadel. Imagine the relief. Imagine the astonishment. Imagine the holy laughter that may have trembled under tired breath when news arrived that the empire had searched its own memory and discovered itself already committed to their future. There is something almost psalm-like in that reversal. The same world that can lose you can also, by God's strange governance, be forced to remember you. And because this is Pastor Michael's kind of chamber, I want to say gently that some listeners are living in the long pause before such remembrance. You have answered honestly. You have kept building what you could. You have endured questions, reviews, hesitations, and delay. Nothing seems settled yet. Ezra does not mock that suspense. It sanctifies it. The searched archive says that heaven is not hurried, but heaven is not careless either. What must be remembered will be remembered when the hour opens wide enough for mercy to step through. So do not despise preserved words, old permissions, or forgotten testimonies. In the hands of providence, yesterday's faithful record can become tomorrow's shelter, and a sealed memory can open like a gate before exhausted builders. That is where we go next. For now, keep this image with you. A scroll sleeping in a far citadel. A decree remembered at the exact hour it is needed. And a weary holy work discovering that what God once caused to be written was still alive enough to guard the future. The Persian echo does not stay in decrees about stone and cedar. It moves into a palace, into perfume, into protocol, into banquets and sealed commands, into the terrifying fragility of a people living far from Jerusalem while their future hangs on the mood of a king and the malice of one wounded official. That is where the seventh chamber opens. Night Traveler. If Ezra gives us the Persian world as archive, decree, and reconstruction, Esther gives us the Persian world as atmosphere, as court life, as risk, as distance between ordinary faithfulness and imperial power. We move now from Jerusalem's rebuilding dust to Susa's polished floors, from returned vessels to royal wine, from governors and memoranda to chambers where beauty, silence, and timing become matters of survival. And still, it is the same empire, the same wide machine, the same Persian order stretching its reach across provinces, languages, couriers, and law. Only now, we are not watching it fund a temple. We are watching it nearly destroy a scattered people. This is why I wanted this chamber in the script, because if we speak of the Persian Empire only as the structure that permitted return, we risk turning it into a kindly backdrop, and it was not that. The Bible refuses simplification. The same imperial world that can underwrite holy work in one place can become the stage for mortal threat in another. That moral complexity is part of the truth. It keeps us from calling empire righteous simply because providence sometimes uses it. Here, the central names are Esther, Mordecai, Ahasuerus, and Haman. In many English Bibles, Ahasuerus is identified with the Persian king, commonly associated with Xerxes. Whether a listener first hears the Hebrew royal title or the wider historical frame, the point remains the same. The throne is Persian. The court is Persian. The danger rises inside Persian bureaucracy, and the salvation, strangely, will also move through Persian procedure. That doubleness is one of Esther's great burdens. The empire is not outside the story. It is the chamber in which the whole conflict occurs. The book begins with a display of scale. Feasts, wealth, textiles, gold, the language of abundance. A king ruling from India to Kush over 127 provinces. That line matters not merely because it sounds impressive. It establishes atmosphere. Persia is enormous. And when a people lives dispersed inside something enormous, vulnerability acquires a special shape. The threatened person cannot simply walk to the center and plead. The empire is too layered, too ritualized, too formal, too guarded. Distance is built into the system. That is what makes Esther such a night book. It understands what it means to live beneath a structure too large to control. It understands the hush of waiting when decisions are being made in rooms you cannot enter. It understands how a decree can travel faster than your ability to answer it. The book's texture is different from Ezra's, but the Persian echo is still unmistakable. There are officials. There are laws that cannot easily be revoked. There are records. There are letters sent by courier. There are provinces receiving commands in their own scripts and languages. The empire appears again as administration made vast. Only now, the machinery is not securing altar wood. It is carrying the possibility of annihilation. That shift should sober us. Providence does not work because empire is morally clean. Providence works because God remains God, even inside morally unstable systems. Mordecai stands near the gate. Esther stands within the palace. That contrast is important. One near power, but outside its inner chamber. The other inside the chamber, but unable to act without grave risk. This is one of the reasons Esther continues to feel so modern. Many people know what it is to be near a system that shapes their future while still lacking direct power within it. They can see the gate. They cannot control the court. They know the stakes. They do not know whether access will be granted. And then comes Haman. His rage is personal. His method is imperial. That combination is always dangerous. A private wound harnessing public machinery can become catastrophe for countless innocents. Haman is not satisfied merely to punish Mordecai. He wants a decree that reaches across the provinces against an entire people. This is empire at its coldest. The individual grievance expands into administrative violence. The human target becomes a category. The category becomes a legal threat, and the law travels outward. Here is the nig fact for this chamber. The word Pur appears in Esther in connection with the lot cast by Haman, and from that word comes Purim, the later feast of remembrance. The proper noun is Pur. Its translation is lot, a cast object used to determine timing. Its historical context is chilling. An official in the Persian court casting lots to choose the month for the destruction of the Jews. Its modern relevance is immediate because many threats still present themselves as impersonal scheduling, neutral procedure, or bureaucratic timing when they are carrying moral violence underneath. And my own Pastor Michael touch on this is simple. Every time I linger over Purim, I feel the ache of how God can turn even a mechanism chosen for destruction into a calendar of remembrance and survival. That is not light comfort. That is sacred reversal. The Jews in Esther are not, at first, singing triumphant songs in open squares. They are mourning, fasting, crying out, clothing themselves in sackcloth and ashes. The Persian world in this chamber feels suffocating. Law has been weaponized. Time has been marked against them. The edict has been sent. The city of Susa itself is thrown into confusion. Do not move too quickly past that line. Not only the Jewish community, but the city is perplexed. The decree has disturbed the civic air. That matters, because evil rarely remains neatly contained inside the intent of its author. It unsettles entire environments. It creates a moral weather that even bystanders can feel. Then comes the most tender and dangerous exchange in the book. Mordecai asks Esther to go to the king. She answers with the reality of court law. No one enters uninvited without risking death unless the golden scepter is extended. She has not been called for 30 days. This is not melodrama. This is Persian protocol. This is how empire feels from the inside. Nearness to royalty does not cancel danger. Sometimes it intensifies it. Mordecai's answer carries the line so many listeners remember. Perhaps you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. I have heard that verse quoted casually, too casually, as though it were a generic motivational slogan. But inside Esther, it is weighted with communal peril. It is not about ambition. It is about vocation under threat. It is about the possibility that someone placed near power may have been positioned there not for status, but for costly intervention. Esther's response is one of the strongest moments of surrendered courage in Scripture. Gather the Jews. Fast for me. I and my young women will fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. There is no cheap heroism in that sentence, only lucid obedience, the kind that knows both the law and the danger and still moves. That is why Esther belongs in this Persian script. She reveals that the empire's echo in the Bible is not only administrative or architectural, it is existential. It touches breath, timing, speech, identity concealed and then disclosed. One woman walking into a room while carrying the unspeakable weight of an entire threatened people. The banquets unfold slowly. This matters. Esther does not rush disclosure. She stages time. Banquet first, then another banquet. Delay becomes part of wisdom. That too is a Persian lesson. When a system is formal and dangerous, timing can be as morally important as truth itself. Not because truth changes, because doors open and close according to rhythms we do not control. In the night between Esther's banquets, another quiet turning point arrives. The king cannot sleep. The book of memorable deeds is brought. Records are read. Mordecai's unrewarded loyalty is discovered. Notice this, dear listener. Even here, in Esther, the empire remembers through documents. Persia keeps its records. And once again, providence passes through the record room. What a recurring Persian sound that is. The sleepless king, the opened book, the remembered deed, the delayed honor, Haman entering at the wrong moment, the whole atmosphere turning by inches. This is not the rush of instant miracle. It is the slow rearrangement of power through preserved memory. How like God to use such means. Not always the dramatic interruption. Sometimes the administrative hinge. Sometimes the line in the archive. Sometimes the night of insomnia. That becomes the doorway to deliverance. Haman imagines himself the favored man. Instead, he must honor Mordecai. Humiliation begins its work. At the second banquet, Esther speaks. Her petition is not abstract. If I have found favor, let my life be granted me, and my people. The threat becomes personal in the king's hearing. The category becomes a face. The intended victims are suddenly connected to the queen herself. This is another moral turning point. Evil often thrives by keeping its targets generalized. When the human person steps into the sentence, the lie loses some of its cover. Haman falls. The gallows prepared for Mordecai becomes the place of his own destruction. Yet, even now, the book remains realistic. The first decree cannot simply be erased. Another Persian word must answer it. A second decree is required. Again, we see the weight of legal structure. Even salvation has to move through the empire's administrative grammar. Mordecai rises. Esther speaks again. Letters are sent. The Jews are given legal right to assemble and defend themselves. Across the provinces, the whole atmosphere changes. Many fear the Jews. Mourning turns toward feasting. Ashes give way to gladness. And still the path to that gladness passed through extreme suspense. What does this chamber add to our wider meditation on the Persian Empire? It tells us that Persia in the Bible is not a single-note phenomenon. It can appear as decree for rebuilding. It can appear as threat of slaughter. It can appear as record-keeping that unexpectedly aids the vulnerable. It can appear as court ritual so rigid that courage must move with immense caution. The empire is neither savior nor simple villain. It is an arena, a structure of power under which God still works for his people without ever surrendering them to chance. And perhaps that is the retention thread I want to place gently in your hands before we leave Susa. The Persian Empire did not only shape the fate of the Jews through royal law, it also shaped the soul of life under foreign rule. How do you remain a people when you are scattered? How do you remain morally awake when survival depends on reading the room carefully? How do you move from fasting to action without collapsing into panic? Esther does not answer those questions cheaply. She answers them through courage joined to restraint, through identity held quietly until the hour comes, through communal fasting, through remembered records, through a God never named directly in the book, and yet everywhere implied by the turnings of the story. That hiddenness is itself part of the Persian mood. The palace is loud. God seems quiet. The system looks absolute. Providence moves in seams. And maybe that is why so many weary people love Esther. She teaches that the absence of overt miracle does not mean the absence of divine government. The hand may be hidden. The turning may still be holy. Now hold that thought as we leave the palace, because the next chamber returns us to another kind of Persian pressure. Not the queen's banquet hall, but the scribe's grief. Not concealed identity in Susa, but exposed compromise in Jerusalem. The empire remains overhead, but now the deepest danger will not come from Haman. It will come from the painful discovery that a returned people can rebuild walls and altar practices and still need their inner life called back into covenant truth. There is also a quieter Persian lesson in Esther that should not be neglected. The Jews of the dispersion are not standing on temple ground while this crisis unfolds. They are living among provinces, names, customs, and courtly expectations not originally their own. In that sense, Esther shows us the emotional cost of long imperial existence. A people may remain present, fruitful, intelligent, and even influential, and still feel the tremor of how easily public permission can shift beneath them. That is why the fasting scenes feel so pure. They strip away the illusion of stability. No garment of the court can secure what God can preserve. No cleverness alone can quiet the sentence once it has entered the empire's bloodstream. The whole community must humble itself. And then there is Mordecai, after deliverance, clothed in royal garments of blue and white, with a great golden crown and a robe of fine linen and purple. The imagery is Persian, but the meaning reaches beyond Persian splendor. The threatened man at the gate becomes the honored servant in the court. Sorrow does not merely stop, it is answered with visible reversal. Yet even here, scripture stays honest. Purim is not founded because danger was imaginary. It is founded because danger was real enough to require memory. Feasting becomes faithful, precisely because mourning had been true. That, too, is sacred wisdom. Do not celebrate as though the wound never existed. Celebrate because God met you in the wound and turned the calendar itself into witness. So when we leave Esther, we do not leave with palace glamour. We leave with a deeper understanding of scattered holiness. The Persian Empire could surround the faithful with luxury, anxiety, law, confusion, delay, and peril all at once. Yet within that world, fasting still mattered. Courage still mattered, timing mattered, records still mattered, and above all, the hidden governance of God still mattered. That is the kind of truth that steadies a listener at night, because it means that even when systems look impersonal and absolute, heaven has not surrendered the room. When Ezra enters the biblical stage, the Persian world has not disappeared. It is still the sky under which the community lives. Artaxerxes rules. Letters still matter. Authorization still matters. Priests and Levites are still moving through imperial geography. Only now the question is not simply whether the people may return. The question is, what kind of people they will be once return has become ordinary. That is one of the saddest and wisest turns in the whole story. It is possible to survive exile. Possible to receive permission, possible to rebuild structures, possible to resume ritual, and still to discover that the heart of the community needs deeper repair. Ezra arrives with a letter from Artaxerxes. Again, the Persian echo sounds through state authorization. A scribe skilled in the law of Moses is sent with permission, resources, and authority. There are vessels once more. There are silver and gold offerings. There are exemptions granted to temple servants. There is judicial authority for ordering communal life, according to the wisdom of God and the command of the king. That combined sentence matters. Persian power is still functioning as corridor. But the real burden of Ezra is not imperial generosity. It is covenant seriousness. Ezra himself is described as one who had set his heart to study the law of the Lord, to do it, and to teach his statutes and rules in Israel. That threefold rhythm is beautiful. Study, do, teach. Not information alone, not private devotion alone, not public teaching detached from personal obedience. All three. Perhaps that is why Ezra feels so weighty. He is not merely a religious official. He is a man shaped by text until text becomes burden, practice, and speech. There is a scene early in Ezra's journey that deserves more love than it often receives. At the river Ahava, Ezra proclaims a fast. He is ashamed to ask the king for soldiers and horsemen, because he has spoken of the good hand of God being upon all who seek him. So the travelers humble themselves and ask God for a safe journey. This is a distinctly Persian moment. The empire can authorize the mission, but the road itself must still be entrusted to God. Not everything can be outsourced to the machinery that issued the permit. That spiritual boundary is precious. It means the people are not merely state-assisted pilgrims. They remain dependent worshippers, and the journey succeeds. The hand of God is acknowledged. Vessels are weighed. Accountability is maintained. Jerusalem is reached. Offerings are made. The law-bearing scribe has arrived. This should feel like stabilization. It should feel like the chapter where fidelity settles naturally into place. But it does not. Instead, the leaders come to Ezra with devastating news. The holy people, including priests and Levites, have not separated themselves from the peoples of the lands with their abominations. Intermarriage has occurred. The holy seed language appears. The hand of the officials and chief men has been foremost in this faithlessness. Now we must move carefully here. This is one of the most difficult chambers in post-exilic literature, and I do not want to turn it into either a slogan or a weapon. The central point in Ezra's grief is covenant fidelity within a community recently restored from judgment. The issue is not ordinary social dislike. It is the fear that Israel, brought back by mercy, is already reproducing the very pattern of mixture and unfaithfulness that once led to catastrophe. Ezra hears this and tears his garment and cloak. He pulls hair from his head and beard. He sits appalled. That word matters. Appalled. Not irritated. Not politically frustrated. Appalled. The scribe's grief is bodily. It is public. It is almost liturgical in its devastation. This is the nig fact for this chamber. The river Ahava deserves to be remembered. The proper noun is Ahava. Its probable sense in context is a canal or staging place connected with Ezra's departure route, though the precise identification remains debated. Its historical context is the gathering point where Ezra assembled returnees, proclaimed a fast, and sought safe passage under God's hand before traveling to Jerusalem. Its modern relevance is profound, because every faithful work still needs an Ahava moment, a place where people stop before the next costly movement and admit that permission, resources, and planning are not enough without divine guidance. And Pastor Michael's personal touch here is very simple. I have come to believe that many disasters in spiritual life begin when communities skip their Ahava, when they move from authorization to activity without ever humbling themselves before God. Ezra's prayer in chapter 9 is one of the heaviest prayers in Scripture. "Oh my God, I am ashamed and blush to lift my face to you. Our iniquities have risen higher than our heads." He speaks in solidarity, not because he personally committed every act, but because covenant leaders know how to carry communal grief in the first person plural. That is rare and holy. Modern culture trains us to protect ourselves with distance. Ezra does the opposite. He identifies with the people's shame before God. "From the days of our fathers to this day, we have been in great guilt." He remembers judgment, kings, priests, sword, captivity, plundering, open shame. Then he speaks of the little reviving granted by God, a remnant, a secure hold within his holy place, a brief grace. That phrase alone could break your heart. A brief grace. They had not been given restoration as proof of innocence. They had been given it as mercy after judgment, and now the fear is that mercy is being treated lightly. That is what makes Ezra's grief so intense. The issue is not perfectionism. It is holy memory. A people who forgot why exile happened are in danger of repeating its logic. And perhaps that is one of the deepest lessons of the Persian period. External return does not automatically produce internal faithfulness. You can change location without changing loves. You can rebuild the temple while still needing the law to search the inner life. You can stand in Jerusalem and still require repentance. This is why Ezra belongs after Esther in our script. Esther shows the threat from outside. Ezra reveals the more intimate danger inside. One is hostile decree. The other is covenant drift. Both are deadly in their own way. When Ezra prays, the people gather around him, weeping very bitterly. Then Shechaniah speaks a hard word of hope. There is hope for Israel in spite of this. Again, the Bible refuses despair, but it also refuses softness. The proposed remedy is severe. Covenant renewal here comes with painful social consequences and deep communal examination. Many modern readers tremble before this chapter, and rightly so. It should not be handled lightly. Whatever interpretive debates we continue to have, the atmosphere of the text is unmistakable. Restoration requires truthfulness, and truthfulness may hurt. Ezra rises. An oath is taken. A process unfolds. Names are named. Cases are addressed. The returned community is forced to confront the cost of becoming distinct again. This is not triumphant religion. It is reform through tears. And then, later, the other great Ezra scene arrives in Nehemiah's frame. The gathered people ask for the book of the law. Ezra brings it before the assembly. Men and women and all who could understand listen. He reads from early morning until midday. A wooden platform is used. The sense is given. The people weep when they hear the words of the law. That scene matters more than many realize. The restored people are being restored again through hearing. The open book becomes an instrument of communal reformation. The Persian world is still present in the background, the province, the governors, the empire's long shadow, but the center of gravity shifts decisively here. The deepest future of the people will not be secured merely by Persian permission. It will be secured by renewed attention to God's word. That is a lesson every age needs. Systems matter. Structures matter. Policies matter. But no people remains holy for long by administration alone. At some point, the book must open. At some point, the meaning must be given. At some point, the tears must become obedience. Ezra's chamber leaves us with a question that is too important to rush. What happens after the danger passes? What happens after survival? What happens when a community is no longer merely fighting extinction, but is asked to become faithful again in the ordinary days that follow rescue? That is where So many holy stories become difficult, and that is why the next chamber must come, because now we will meet Nehemiah, the cupbearer who prayed, wept, planned, surveyed broken stones at night, and discovered that in the Persian world, even rebuilding a wall could become a spiritual contest involving memory, courage, mockery, labor, and a sword carried beside the tools. There is another reason Ezra's tears matter so much. They protect the restored community from mistaking motion for maturity. The people had traveled, settled, sacrificed, and rebuilt. Those are not small things, but Ezra's horror reveals that external progress can coexist with inward danger. That lesson belongs to every generation. We are often tempted to measure health by visible momentum alone. Projects completed, meetings held, structures secured, public forms restored. Ezra kneels inside a different measurement. Has the heart returned? Has obedience become inward? Has grace produced reverence, or merely relief? Those are much harder questions, and they cannot be answered by architecture. I also cannot read Ezra without noticing how communal grief becomes communal hearing. The man who tears his garments later becomes the man who opens the book. That sequence is beautiful. First anguish, then explanation. First appalled silence, then articulate instruction. It is as though the community must see that the law is not being wielded by a cold technician, but by someone already broken before God. That gives moral weight to his teaching. A text handled without tears can become brutality. A text handled through tears may still wound, but it wounds like surgery rather than contempt. And when the people stand to hear the law, another miracle occurs. Attention itself is restored. Men and women stand for hours. Ears are directed. Meaning is given. Understanding spreads through the assembly. In an age of distracted minds, that feels almost impossible. Yet Scripture presents it as one of the true signs of renewal. A people becoming holy again becomes teachable again, not entertained, not merely stirred, teachable. The book is no longer a background object. It becomes bread. Then comes that remarkable pastoral correction from Nehemiah and Ezra together. Do not mourn or weep, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. That line is often detached from its setting. In context, it is not the denial of conviction. It is the guidance of a people who have heard enough to break, and now must learn that holy sorrow is meant to lead into obedient joy, not endless collapse. Eat the fat, drink the sweet wine, send portions to anyone who has nothing ready. The day is holy. How tender that is. Even reformation must not become self-consuming despair. God's word exposes, but it also gathers, feeds, and steadies. That balance is part of Ezra's greatness. So this chamber leaves us with open hands rather than clenched ones. The Persian setting remains overhead, yes, but the decisive scene is now the opened book and the humbled people. That is where recovery deepens. Not merely in having survived empire, but in allowing the Word of God to search the life that empire could not finally define. There is also the long patience of Ezra himself. He does not treat teaching as performance. He prepares, weighs, appoints, fasts, prays, reads, explains, and waits while the people absorb what they are hearing. That pace matters. Communities formed under pressure often want immediate resolution. Ezra embodies another rhythm. Truth may need to be heard slowly enough for the conscience to catch up. Meaning may need to be given line by line. Tears may need room before obedience becomes possible. In that sense, Ezra is not merely a reformer. He is a steward of sacred pace. And notice how often the chapter joins text with embodiment. Hands lifted, faces bowed, amen spoken. people standing in place. Joy expressed through eating, drinking, and sharing portions. The word does not remain trapped in abstraction. It enters posture, meal, generosity, and calendar. That is what healthy restoration looks like. The law is not simply understood, it is inhabited. A people begins to live inside its meaning again. Perhaps that is why Ezra's chamber feels both severe and healing. The same word that exposes mixture also gathers the weak, instructs the confused, and teaches the returned exiles how to become a listening community once more. Such listening is its own return. The scattered mind gathers, the numb conscience wakes. The frightened community learns that understanding can itself become shelter under God when every other shelter has felt uncertain for far too long. Steady, patient, listening, returning, together. If Esther is the chamber of palace risk, and Ezra the chamber of covenant grief, Nehemiah is the chamber of burdened action. A report comes from Judah. The remnant there in the province is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down. Its gates are destroyed by fire. That sentence enters Nehemiah like an arrow. He sits down and weeps. He mourns for days. He fasts and prays before the God of heaven. Notice how quickly Persia and prayer meet again. Nehemiah is not a free village laborer. He is cupbearer to the king. He serves in Susa. He lives near imperial power. The pain of Jerusalem reaches him there. This is one more Persian echo. The empire has scattered Jewish lives into distant roles and courtly positions, yet covenant memory still travels farther than distance. Nehemiah's prayers saturated with confession and promise. He remembers Moses. He remembers covenant terms. He asks for favor before this man, meaning the king. That phrase is both humble and sharp. This man, the monarch, is real. His authority is great. But he is still only a man beneath the God of heaven. When the king notices Nehemiah's sadness, danger and opportunity arrive together. Why is your face sad, seeing you are not sick? Then I was very much afraid. Nehemiah says, that admission gives the moment its truth. Petition under empire is never casual. Nehemiah speaks. He names the city of his father's graves. He asks to be sent. The queen is present. The king asks how long. Letters are requested. Timber is requested from Asaph, keeper of the king's forest. And the good hand of my God was upon me. There it is again. Persian infrastructure, divine favor, practical planning, prayerful dependence. The whole Nehemiah story moves with that braided strength. This is the nig fact for the 9th chamber. The proper noun is Susa, also known as Shushan. Its translation is not the point so much as its identity. A Persian royal center and administrative capital. Its historical context is crucial because Nehemiah serves there as cupbearer before receiving permission from Artaxerxes to return and rebuild Jerusalem's walls. Its modern relevance is that many callings begin far from the place they are meant to bless. Some of the most important burdens of your life may take shape in rooms that seem unrelated to your true destination. And my Pastor Michael touch is this. I have always loved that God let a wall begin in the heart of a man holding a cup in a distant palace. The first stone was laid in prayer long before it was laid in Jerusalem. Nehemiah arrives. Officials know he has come. And then one of the most cinematic quiet scenes in scripture unfolds. He goes out by night. Few know what God has put into his heart. He inspects the walls, the valley gate, the dragon spring, the dung gate, broken stones, burned gates, ruined lines where communal strength once stood. This night survey is deeply Pastor Michael in spirit. No spectacle, no speech yet. Just a man, darkness, rubble, and a burden being turned into clarity. He looks before he announces. He grieves before he organizes. He lets reality touch him directly. Then he speaks to the officials, priests, nobles, and people. You see the trouble we are in. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer suffer derision. He tells them of the hand of God and of the king's words, and they answer, let us rise up and build. There is strength in communal resolve, but almost immediately opposition rises. Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, mockery, contempt. What is this thing that you are doing? Will you rebel against the king? Again, the Persian angle matters. The accusation is political. Rebellion. The builders must answer within the logic of empire, even while acting under the God of heaven. Nehemiah's answer is sturdy. The God of heaven will make us prosper, and we, his servants, will arise and build. But you have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem. Then comes the labor itself. Families repairing sections, priests repairing, goldsmiths repairing, perfume makers repairing, daughters named in the work. One section after another. Nehemiah is full of names and gates and measured stretches, much like Ezra's earlier lists. This is not accidental. The Bible honors the distributed labor of restoration. Holy rebuilding is communal, local, practical, but ridicule intensifies. Tobiah mocks the wall. Even a fox going up on it would break it down. Then threat becomes more direct. Plots arise. Confusion spreads. The response is unforgettable. We prayed to our God and set a guard. Half-worked, half-held spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail. The builders labored with one hand and held a weapon with the other. Each had his sword strapped at his side while building. What a picture. This is the Persian period realism I never want to lose. Jerusalem is not rebuilt in naive peace. It is rebuilt under watch, with prayer and vigilance, with trumpet and tool, with fatigue and resolve. Nehemiah also faces internal pressure, economic injustice among the people, the exploitation of brothers by brothers. Again, the Bible refuses a simple outside-inside divide. Opposition comes from enemies, yes, but reform is also needed within. Nehemiah confronts nobles, demands redress, shakes out his garment as a sign, refuses to use his office for selfish gain. This is leadership under Persian oversight, but not defined by Persian values. He serves with fear of God. He keeps working. He keeps praying. Remember me for good, oh my God. That line runs through the book like a quiet breath. Not self-celebration, dependence. The wall is completed in 52 days. That speed shocks the enemies. They perceive that the work had been accomplished with the help of our God. There it is again. Heaven inside history. Not replacing stones. Not skipping labor, but empowering it. And yet the wall is not the whole point. As in Ezra, external rebuilding must open toward internal formation. The people gather. The law is read. Covenant is renewed. Confession is made. Booths are kept. Promises are sealed. Nehemiah's chamber therefore closes the active arc of our Persian meditation before sleep begins. In him, the empire's echo sounds through court permission, official letters, forest timber, governors, threats of accusation, and the ever-present fact that Jerusalem's future unfolds beneath foreign sovereignty. And yet beneath that sky a people prays, labors, repents, organizes, remembers, and rebuilds. That is the point. The Persian world is large. God's faithfulness is larger. Not louder, always larger. Before we lower the pace, hold the loop that has been with us from the opening. Persia in the Bible is not mere backdrop. It is pressure, corridor, threat, archive, court, road, altar, banquet, open book, broken wall. In every chamber, the people of God learn again how to live, fear, pray, and obey under structures they do not control. Now the story has given us enough. The title promise has been honored. The empire has echoed through decree, Esther's danger, Ezra's grief, and Nehemiah's night labor. What remains is not a new chamber of information. What remains is the quiet descent. Nehemiah's greatness is not that he never feels pressure. It is that he keeps converting pressure into ordered faithfulness. Mockery becomes prayer. Threat becomes vigilance. Ruin becomes assignment. Delay becomes planning. That rhythm makes him one of the most practical saints in the whole post-exilic story. He does not romanticize burden. He carries it. He organizes it into action. And because he does, the people around him begin to believe that broken things may actually rise. I love, too, how bodily the whole wall narrative feels. Hands placing stones, necks bent to the work, trumpets ready, families stationed near vulnerable points, watchmen scanning the horizon. This is not abstract spirituality. It is obedience with dust on it. Persian-era faith often looks like that in Scripture. Very earthly, very specific, very exposed. A city under foreign sovereignty cannot afford theatrical religion. It needs resilient faithfulness that knows how to pray while standing guard. And there is that unforgettable line from the people under strain. The strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There is too much rubble. By ourselves, we will not be able to rebuild the wall. What honesty. What relief to hear it spoken. Even in a God-backed work, exhaustion is real. Rubble is real. The scale of unfinishedness is real. Nehemiah does not cure them with slogans. He stations families. He strengthens defenses. He reminds them of the Lord, great and awesome. Courage here is not denial. It is memory applied to fatigue. Then later, when enemies try subtler tactics, inviting him to meet in the plain of Ono, Nehemiah answers with magnificent clarity. I am doing a great work and cannot come down. That line has protected many souls from distraction. Not every invitation deserves dissent. Not every summons is innocent. In a contested season, focus becomes holiness. The wall is finished, partly because Nehemiah refuses to come down into conversations designed to weaken resolve. That is wisdom every builder needs. So when we arrive at the completion of the wall, we should hear more than success. We should hear perseverance under Persian sky. We should hear families who kept working through fear. We should hear a leader who prayed short prayers and made long plans. We should hear the difference between panic and resolve. And we should hear behind all of it the mercy of God making a vulnerable people harder to erase than their enemies expected. There is another mercy hidden in Nehemiah's method. He keeps turning private anguish into shared courage. He does not hoard the burden so that others remain passive. He tells the story of God's hand and the king's permission, and the people find strength together. That is pastoral wisdom. Real leadership does not merely feel deeply. It helps others stand up inside the feeling and take their portion of the wall. And once the gates are hung and the lines are restored, Jerusalem is not simply safer. It is more legible again. A city with boundaries can gather life differently. Worship can breathe differently. Families can imagine continuity differently. The wall is not the soul of the people, but it serves the soul by making communal life less vulnerable to constant derision and interruption. So when Nehemiah remembers God at the end of his efforts, he is not asking heaven to notice a monument to himself. He is placing the whole labor back into divine hands, where every faithful builder must leave it at last. This is why Nehemiah's wall is more than masonry. It is disciplined love made visible. Every repaired gap says the people are refusing disappearance. Every lifted stone says derision will not have the final word. Every shared watch says covenant memory is learning to stand upright again under strain. And when the city begins to hold together, the people are not merely safer, they are steadier, more able to worship, work, and remember without feeling that ruin has the only permanent claim on their future. Quietly, together, again. And that steadiness matters because a city can survive mockery for a season, but it cannot flourish until its people remember how to stand together under God again. Now we do not gather new facts. Now we do not open another archive. Now we do not ask another official question. The chambers we needed have given their sound. Persia has passed before us in decree and danger, in records and roads, in palace risk and broken stones. That is enough for tonight. So let the empire begin to grow distant. Let Susa move farther away. Let the couriers slow in the imagination. Let the gates of Jerusalem stand without strain. Let the archive close softly. Let the banquets dim. Let the wall rest beneath moonlight. You do not need to carry every king into sleep. You do not need to hold every province in your mind. You do not need to rehearse every decree once more. The story has already done its work. It has shown you that God was not absent under foreign skies. It has shown you that prayer could live in palaces, on roads, by rivers, before altars, beneath accusation, and beside unfinished walls. It has shown you that a scattered people were not forgotten. And if that is true in the old pages, then perhaps you may loosen your grip a little tonight as well. Imagine now the high plateau. The air is cool. The ground is wide and still. Far off, perhaps beyond the last line of sight, there is the faint sound of bells carried on night wind. Not urgent bells, not warning bells, only distant bells. The kind that do not demand anything from you. The kind that simply tell you the world is larger than the room in which you are trying to rest. Let the sky above that plateau widen. Let the pressure thin. Let the old imperial corridors dissolve into open dark. No courier is coming for you now. No accusation is being drafted against you now. No gate must be rebuilt by your tired hands tonight. No risk must be taken before dawn. The work can remain where it is. The record can remain closed. The stones can keep their place without your watching them. Even Jerusalem, in the deep tenderness of Scripture, learned to sleep under God's keeping and not under human vigilance alone. So breathe more slowly. Let the breath go out without argument. Let the shoulders soften. Let the face unclench. Let the mind stop measuring distances between Susa and Jerusalem, between decree and return, between burden and answer. Tonight there is no distance you must solve. There is only the quiet land of rest opening a little more. The plateau receives the night without complaint. The wind moves over it gently. The bells are farther now. The empire is farther now. The books are resting in their chambers. Esther is no longer standing before the king. Ezra is no longer weeping before the assembly. Nehemiah is no longer circling ruined stones. Cyrus has spoken. Darius has searched. Artaxerxes has permitted. And now all those sounds may recede. What remains near you is simpler, cool air, low light, steady ground, a held life. If your thoughts begin reaching again for the next detail, let them set it down. If they begin asking for one more answer, let the question pass by like wind over grass. Nothing is required of you in this moment except release. Release of the page. Release of the analysis. Release of the need to keep the story awake. The story can sleep in God's memory, and you may sleep in God's keeping. so stay here on the high, quiet ground. Let the wind cross the dark without threat. Let the far bells fade almost completely. Let the night become kind around you. Let the long history of empire become smaller and smaller until it is only a whisper behind the hills. And let your own soul stop striving to be its own guard. The watch has been handed over. The keeping is no longer yours. Rest now beneath the wide sky. Rest with the old pages closed. Rest while the distant world continues without asking anything more from you tonight. And if the mind tries to climb back into the story, let it step down again. There is nowhere else you must go tonight. Not back to Susa. Not back to the river. Not back to the wall. The pages are resting now. The lamps in the archive are low. The plateau is wide and patient. Wind passes, and then more wind passes, and nothing in that movement is asking you to solve history before you can sleep. The distant bells are softer still. Perhaps now they are only the suggestion of bells, barely touching the edge of hearing. Let them remain there. Let them be far enough away that they become part of the dark, instead of a call within it. The sky above you does not hurry. The ground beneath you does not argue. The night keeps its own slow order without needing anything from your tired mind. So loosen the last inward grip. Let the chest settle. Let the thoughts lengthen and thin. Let the old names become kind shadows, and then even softer than shadows. Let the long empire go where all finished study must go at the end of a faithful night, away from the hands, away from the pulse, away into the keeping of God. You are not losing the story by releasing it. You are only allowing rest to become stronger than effort for a little while. Stay on the high ground. Stay under the open dark. Let the bells fade completely if they wish. Let the wind be the final sound. Let the quiet be enough. And where quiet is enough, sleep may come gently, without pressure, without performance, and without one more thought needing to stand guard at the gate. The high ground does not rush you. It simply receives you. The dark does not press against you. It opens around you. The air is cool enough to calm, and gentle enough not to startle. Somewhere far beyond sight, the world continues its old movements, but none of those movements belong to you now. Not tonight. Not in this quiet hour. If memory brings back the palace, let it drift. If memory brings back the wall, let it drift. If memory brings back decrees, records, names, and dangers, let them drift also. They are allowed to become small now. They are allowed to fall behind the hills of thought until they can no longer trouble the breath. You are not required to keep them near. You are allowed to let them go. Feel how wide the night has become. Feel how the plateau seems to carry the weight for you. There is nothing sharp here. Nothing hurried here. Nothing to defend. Nothing to rebuild. Nothing to explain. Only the steady kindness of stillness. Only the soft movement of air. Only the sense that the world has stepped back a little so that rest may step forward. Even the far bells are gone now, or almost gone. Perhaps what remains is only the memory of their gentleness. Let even that become faint. Let the wind smooth the last edges of thought. Let the mind grow unoccupied. Let the body grow heavy in a peaceful way. Let the soul stop rehearsing, and if one small worry lingers, do not wrestle with it. Leave it where it is, and lie down beneath a mercy larger than thought. The sky does not ask you to solve yourself before it shelters you. The night does not ask you to become wise before it quiets you. Rest may come just as you are, slowly, softly, and without resistance. Soon even the idea of distance may grow softer. No far province, no near gate, no inner court, no outer wall. Only space, dark, wind, and the gentle permission to stop carrying history in your muscles. Let the body learn what the mind has been slow to accept. The night can keep watch without your effort. The breath enters. The breath leaves. Nothing more is required. One slow breath, then another. One quiet letting go, then another. If thoughts rise, let them pass without greeting. If images return, let them fade without resistance. The plateau remains. The sky remains. The stillness remains. And you may simply rest within what remains. No more climbing back toward the study. No more lifting the old names. No more arranging details in the dark. The labor is over for tonight. The reading is over for tonight. The inward guarding is over for tonight. There is only a widening calm, and beneath it, a steadier release. Gently, quietly, safely. Enough. Let the quiet widen a little more. Let the wind do the last speaking. Let the sky hold what you no longer need to hold. Nothing more must be built tonight. Nothing more must be understood tonight. Rest is enough now, and enough is a gentle place to fall asleep within for now. The night is wide now, and nothing in it is asking you to become sharper. Nothing in it is asking you to explain yourself. Nothing in it is asking you to reopen the old chambers of study and walk back through them one more time. The plateau is enough. The open dark is enough. The cool air moving above the high ground is enough. So let the body hear that quiet truth. Let the body realize that no more labor is required tonight. Let the breath become the only small motion that matters for a while. It comes in gently. It goes out gently. It comes in without strain. It goes out without demand. If the day taught your body to brace itself, the night may now teach it another lesson. It may teach the forehead to smooth. It may teach the jaw to loosen. It may teach the shoulders to lower. It may teach the hands to uncurl. It may teach the chest to trust its own breathing without supervision. It may teach the legs and feet that no further journey is being asked of them. This is not a hard lesson. It is a soft one. It is learned by degrees. The plateau welcomes gradual things. The wind welcomes gradual things. The deep night welcomes gradual things. Let your attention move lightly to the forehead, not with inspection, only with kindness. If any small remainder of effort is still living there, let the next breath pass near it and do nothing more. Let the next breath leave and take a little of that effort with it. On the high ground, there is no reward for holding on. There is only relief in setting down what no longer needs to stay awake. Think of the wide horizon that takes every remaining thought and lets it grow small. Think of how quietly it remains. Let the forehead learn from that quiet. Let it understand that no answer is required there now. Perhaps the eyes has been carrying more of the day than you knew. Many burdens choose hidden places. They settle there and wait, hoping not to be noticed. But now the night has noticed gently, and gentle noticing is enough. You do not need to fix that place. You only need to stop asking it for more work. The plateau is already teaching the body another way to exist. The grass that moves a little and then becomes still again remains without struggle. In the same way, the eyes may lower, loosen, and become simpler. It may stop rehearsing the day. It may stop preparing for tomorrow. It may rest, because nothing urgent is rising there now. Let the breath arrive at the jaw as though it were a soft wind crossing grass. Let the breath leave the jaw as though it were carrying away a little dust from an old stone path. No sudden change is needed. The night is full of gradual mercies. One measure of release, then another still. If the mind tries to inspect the process, let that inspection drift away. The body knows more about sleeping than the mind does. The body knows how to yield when it is finally safe. Think of the old stones that keep their silence without effort. Think of its steadiness. Let the jaw borrow that steadiness now. Let it become quiet, because that place no longer needs to defend you from the day. Let your attention move lightly to the throat, not with inspection, only with kindness. If any small remainder of effort is still living there, let the next breath pass near it and do nothing more. Let the next breath leave and take a little of that effort with it. On the high ground, there is no reward for holding on. There is only relief in setting down what no longer needs to stay awake. Think of the distant bell that has almost disappeared into softness. Think of how quietly it remains. Let the throat learn from that quiet. Let it understand that even that hidden effort may now set itself down. Perhaps the shoulders has been carrying more of the day than you knew. Many burdens choose hidden places. They settle there and wait, hoping not to be noticed. But now, the night has noticed gently, and gentle noticing is enough. You do not need to fix that place. You only need to stop asking it for more work. The plateau is already teaching the body another way to exist. The cool air that passes over the high ground without leaving pressure behind it remains without struggle. In the same way, the shoulders may lower, loosen, and become simpler. It may stop rehearsing the day. It may stop preparing for tomorrow. It may rest because it may become quiet without reporting to anyone. Let the breath arrive at the arms as though it were a soft wind crossing grass. Let the breath leave the arms as though it were carrying away a little dust from an old stone path. No sudden change is needed. The night is full of gradual mercies. One measure of release, then another still. If the mind tries to inspect the process, let that inspection drift away. The body knows more about sleeping than the mind does. The body knows how to yield when it is finally safe. Think of the dark sky that shelters without pressing. Think of its steadiness. Let the arms borrow that steadiness now. Let it become quiet, because it may soften without needing to do so all at once. Let your attention move lightly to the hands, not with inspection, only with kindness. If any small remainder of effort is still living there, let the next breath pass near it and do nothing more. Let the next breath leave and take a little of that effort with it. On the high ground, there is no reward for holding on. There is only relief in setting down what no longer needs to stay awake. Think of the open land that does not crowd you with any demand. Think of how quietly it remains. Let the hands learn from that quiet. Let it understand that its small labor may end here for the night. Perhaps the chest has been carrying more of the day than you knew. Many burdens choose hidden places. They settle there and wait, hoping not to be noticed. But now, the night has noticed gently, and gentle noticing is enough. You do not need to fix that place. You only need to stop asking it for more work. The plateau is already teaching the body another way to exist. The patient wind that knows how to move and then let stillness return remains without struggle. In the same way, the chest may lower, loosen, and become simpler. It may stop rehearsing the day. It may stop preparing for tomorrow. It may rest because it may trust the stillness beneath it. Let the breath arrive at the stomach as though it were a soft wind crossing grass. Let the breath leave the stomach as though it were carrying away a little dust from an old stone path. No sudden change is needed. The night is full of gradual mercies. One measure of release, then another still. If the mind tries to inspect the process, let that inspection drift away. The body knows more about sleeping than the mind does. The body knows how to yield when it is finally safe. Think of the wide horizon that takes every remaining thought and lets it grow small. Think of its steadiness. Let the stomach borrow that steadiness now. Let it become quiet, because no answer is required there now. Let your attention move lightly to the back, not with inspection, only with kindness. If any small remainder of effort is still living there, let the next breath pass near it and do nothing more. Let the next breath leave and take a little of that effort with it. On the high ground, there is no reward for holding on. There is only relief in setting down what no longer needs to stay awake. Think of the grass that moves a little and then becomes still again. Think of how quietly it remains. Let the back learn from that quiet. Let it understand that nothing urgent is rising there now. Perhaps the hips has been carrying more of the day than you knew. Many burdens choose hidden places. They settle there and wait, hoping not to be noticed. But now the night has noticed gently, and gentle noticing is enough. You do not need to fix that place. You only need to stop asking it for more work. The plateau is already teaching the body another way to exist. The old stones that keep their silence without effort remains without struggle. In the same way, the hips may lower, loosen, and become simpler. It may stop rehearsing the day. It may stop preparing for tomorrow. It may rest, because that place no longer needs to defend you from the day. Let the breath arrive at the legs as though it were a soft wind crossing grass. Let the breath leave the legs as though it were carrying away a little dust from an old stone path. No sudden change is needed. The night is full of gradual mercies. One measure of release, then another still. If the mind tries to inspect the process, let that inspection drift away. The body knows more about sleeping than the mind does. The body knows how to yield when it is finally safe. Think of the distant bell that has almost disappeared into softness. Think of its steadiness. Let the legs borrow that steadiness now. Let it become quiet, because even that hidden effort may now set itself down. Let your attention move lightly to the knees, not with inspection, only with kindness. If any small remainder of effort is still living there, let the next breath pass near it and do nothing more. Let the next breath leave and take a little of that effort with it. On the high ground, there is no reward for holding on. There is only relief in setting down what no longer needs to stay awake. Think of the cool air that passes over the high ground without leaving pressure behind it. Think of how quietly it remains. Let the knees learn from that quiet. Let it understand that it may become quiet without reporting to anyone. Perhaps the feet has been carrying more of the day than you knew. Many burdens choose hidden places. They settle there and wait, hoping not to be noticed. But now, the night has noticed gently, and gentle noticing is enough. You do not need to fix that place. You only need to stop asking it for more work. The plateau is already teaching the body another way to exist. The dark sky that shelters without pressing remains without struggle. In the same way, the feet may lower, loosen, and become simpler. It may stop rehearsing the day. It may stop preparing for tomorrow. It may rest because it may soften without needing to do so all at once. Let the breath arrive at the forehead as though it were a soft wind crossing grass. Let the breath leave the forehead as though it were carrying away a little dust from an old stone path. No sudden change is needed. The night is full of gradual mercies. One measure of release, then another still. If the mind tries to inspect the process, let that inspection drift away. The body knows more about sleeping than the mind does. The body knows how to yield when it is finally safe. Think of the open land that does not crowd you with any demand. Think of its steadiness. Let the forehead borrow that steadiness now. Let it become quiet, because its small labor may end here for the night. Let your attention move lightly to the eyes, not with inspection, only with kindness. If any small remainder of effort is still living there, let the next breath pass near it and do nothing more. Let the next breath leave and take a little of that effort with it. On the high ground, There is no reward for holding on. There is only relief in setting down what no longer needs to stay awake. Think of the patient wind that knows how to move and then let stillness return. Think of how quietly it remains. Let the eyes learn from that quiet. Let it understand that it may trust the stillness beneath it. Perhaps the jaw has been carrying more of the day than you knew. Many burdens choose hidden places. They settle there and wait, hoping not to be noticed. But now the night has noticed gently, and gentle noticing is enough. You do not need to fix that place. You only need to stop asking it for more work. The plateau is already teaching the body another way to exist. The wide horizon that takes every remaining thought and lets it grow small remains without struggle. In the same way, the jaw may lower, loosen, and become simpler. It may stop rehearsing the day. It may stop preparing for tomorrow. It may rest because no answer is required there now. Let the breath arrive at the throat as though it were a soft wind crossing grass. Let the breath leave the throat as though it were carrying away a little dust from an old stone path. No sudden change is needed. The night is full of gradual mercies, one measure of release, then another still. If the mind tries to inspect the process, let that inspection drift away. The body knows more about sleeping than the mind does. The body knows how to yield when it is finally safe. Think of the grass that moves a little and then becomes still again. Think of its steadiness. Let the throat borrow that steadiness now. Let it become quiet because nothing urgent is rising there now. Let your attention move lightly to the shoulders, not with inspection, only with kindness. If any small remainder of effort is still living there, let the next breath pass near it and do nothing more. Let the next breath leave and take a little of that effort with it. On the high ground, there is no reward for holding on. There is only relief in setting down what no longer needs to stay awake. Think of the old stones that keep their silence without effort. Think of how quietly it remains. Let the shoulders learn from that quiet. Let it understand that that place no longer needs to defend you from the day. Perhaps the arms has been carrying more of the day than you knew. Many burdens choose hidden places. They settle there and wait, hoping not to be noticed. But now, the night has noticed gently, and gentle noticing is enough. You do not need to fix that place. You only need to stop asking it for more work. The plateau is already teaching the body another way to exist. The distant bell that has almost disappeared into softness remains without struggle. In the same way, the arms may lower, loosen, and become simpler. It may stop rehearsing the day. It may stop preparing for tomorrow. It may rest because even that hidden effort may now set itself down. Let the breath arrive at the hands as though it were a soft wind crossing grass. Let the breath leave the hands as though it were carrying away a little dust from an old stone path. No sudden change is needed. The night is full of gradual mercies. One measure of release, then another still. If the mind tries to inspect the process, let that inspection drift away. The body knows more about sleeping than the mind does. The body knows how to yield when it is finally safe. Think of the cool air that passes over the high ground without leaving pressure behind it. Think of its steadiness. Let the hands borrow that steadiness now. Let it become quiet, because it may become quiet without reporting to anyone. Let your attention move lightly to the chest. Not with inspection, only with kindness. If any small remainder of effort is still living there, let the next breath pass near it and do nothing more. Let the next breath leave and take a little of that effort with it. On the high ground, there is no reward for holding on. There is only relief in setting down what no longer needs to stay awake. Think of the dark sky that shelters without pressing. Think of how quietly it remains. Let the chest learn from that quiet. Let it understand that it may soften without needing to do so all at once. Now, let the whole body be gathered back into one simple awareness. The forehead quieter, the jaw easier, the shoulders lower, the hands empty, the chest trusting the next breath without needing to supervise it, the back resting into support, the legs no longer preparing for motion, the feet gone still at last. And because the body is learning this piece, the mind may learn from the body. It may stop arranging the next hour. It may stop checking the edges of the dark. It may stop holding itself in readiness for a call that is not coming. There is only the high plateau now. Only the wind. Only the cool dark. Only the permission to be carried closer and closer to sleep. Let every remaining edge soften until it scarcely feels like an edge at all. Stay here, where quiet is enough, and where enough is gentle enough to become sleep. The bells are almost gone now. If any trace of them remains, it is only a tenderness at the far edge of hearing. They no longer call. They no longer signal. They no longer ask the mind to turn and listen. They are simply fading, and their fading is part of the mercy. Not every gentle thing must remain near to complete its work. Some things lead you towards sleep and then disappear into the same dark they helped make kind. So let the bells recede. Let the horizon recede. Let the very idea of distance become softer and less important. The plateau remains, but now it may feel less like a place you are picturing and more like a piece you are receiving. That is good. That means the image no longer has to work so hard. That means the mind no longer has to keep the details bright. It may blur the edges now. It may let the sky become only shelter. It may let the ground become only support. It may let the wind become only the faint suggestion of motion inside a larger stillness. Let that be true of the breath now. There is nothing for it to prove now. You do not need to force it towards sleep. Often the last thin edge of wakefulness loosens more easily when it is not opposed. So do not oppose it. Let it stand for a moment in the quiet air and realize there is nothing left to guard. Then let it soften by itself. Think of mist lowering over open land. Notice how nothing in that image argues with its own fading. In the same way, your breath may become gentler without being told exactly how. A deeper calm moves through now, perhaps so quietly that it almost escapes notice. Another small measure of tension falls away. Another small cluster of thoughts loses shape. Another small inward holding becomes unnecessary. The night does not announce these changes. It only allows them. That is why this hour is so kind. It permits simplification. It permits drowsiness. It permits the lovely uncertainty where waking begins to loosen its claim. Let the mind enter that uncertainty softly. Let water settling in a basin after the hand that stirred it has gone still show you the way. It may become smaller without losing anything important. If the body still feels slightly alert, meet that alertness with patience. There is no need for frustration here. The plateau has no frustration in it. The dark has no hurry in it. The wind does not demand efficiency from the grass, and the night does not demand efficiency from you. It only asks nothing. And in that asking nothing, something beautiful happens. The body begins to understand that it may stop. It may stop guarding what the night can hold better than it can. Think of a lamp growing lower in a safe room, and let the quiet in that image spread a little farther through you. Let that be true of the hearing now. It may soften because no further effort is needed. You do not need to force it towards sleep. Often the last thin edge of wakefulness loosens more easily when it is not opposed. So do not oppose it. Let it stand for a moment in the quiet air and realize there is nothing left to guard. Then let it soften by itself. Think of grass bending, and then standing quiet again after the wind passes. Notice how nothing in that image argues with its own fading. In the same way, Your hearing may become gentler without being told exactly how. A deeper calm moves through now, perhaps so quietly that it almost escapes notice. Another small measure of tension falls away. Another small cluster of thoughts loses shape. Another small inward holding becomes unnecessary. The night does not announce these changes. It only allows them. That is why this hour is so kind. It permits simplification. It permits drowsiness. It permits the lovely uncertainty where waking begins to loosen its claim. Let the memory enter that uncertainty softly. Let stars remaining calm above a world that no longer needs explanation show you the way. It may drift because the dark is wide enough to receive it. If the watchfulness still feels slightly alert, meet that alertness with patience. There is no need for frustration here. The plateau has no frustration in it. The dark has no hurry in it. The wind does not demand efficiency from the grass, and the night does not demand efficiency from you. It only asks nothing. And in that asking nothing, something beautiful happens. The watchfulness begins to understand that it may stop. It may grow quiet in layers, one layer after another. Think of a field resting after every footstep has ceased, and let the quiet in that image spread a little farther through you. Let that be true of the time now. It may release its last thin edge of insistence. You do not need to force it towards sleep. Often the last thin edge of wakefulness loosens more easily when it is not opposed. So do not oppose it. Let it stand for a moment in the quiet air and realize there is nothing left to guard. Then let it soften by itself. Think of a path vanishing into blue darkness where no one needs to walk. Notice how nothing in that image argues with its own fading. In the same way, your time may become gentler without being told exactly how. A deeper calm moves through now, perhaps so quietly that it almost escapes notice. Another small measure of tension falls away. Another small cluster of thoughts loses shape. Another small inward holding becomes unnecessary. The night does not announce these changes. It only allows them. That is why this hour is so kind. It permits simplification. It permits drowsiness. It permits the lovely uncertainty where waking begins to loosen its claim. Let the heart enter that uncertainty softly. Let cloud shadow dissolving over a ridge at the close of day show you the way. It may become less exact and more peaceful. If the awareness still feels slightly alert, meet that alertness with patience. There is no need for frustration here. The plateau has no frustration in it. The dark has no hurry in it. The wind does not demand efficiency from the grass, and the night does not demand efficiency from you. It only asks nothing. And in that asking nothing, something beautiful happens. The awareness begins to understand that it may stop. There is nothing for it to prove now. Think of mist lowering over open land, and let the quiet in that image spread a little farther through you. Let that be true of the drowsiness now. It may become smaller without losing anything important. You do not need to force it towards sleep. Often the last thin edge of wakefulness loosens more easily when it is not opposed. So do not oppose it. Let it stand for a moment in the quiet air and realize there is nothing left to guard. Then let it soften by itself. Think of water settling in a basin after the hand that stirred it has gone still. Notice how nothing in that image argues with its own fading. In the same way, your drowsiness may become gentler without being told exactly how. A deeper calm moves through now, perhaps so quietly that it almost escapes notice. Another small measure of tension falls away. Another small cluster of thoughts loses shape. Another small inward holding becomes unnecessary. The night does not announce these changes. It only allows them. That is why this hour is so kind. It permits simplification. It permits drowsiness. It permits the lovely uncertainty where waking begins to loosen its claim. Let the breath enter that uncertainty softly. Let a lamp growing lower in a safe room show you the way. It may stop guarding what the night can hold better than it can. If the mind still feels slightly alert, meet that alertness with patience. There is no need for frustration here. The plateau has no frustration in it. The dark has no hurry in it. The wind does not demand efficiency from the grass, and the night does not demand efficiency from you. It only asks nothing, and in that, asking nothing, something beautiful happens. The mind begins to understand that it may stop. It may soften because no further effort is needed. Think of grass bending and then standing quiet again after the wind passes, and let the quiet in that image spread a little farther through you. Let that be true of the body now. It may drift because the dark is wide enough to receive it. You do not need to force it towards sleep. Often the last thin edge of wakefulness loosens more easily when it is not opposed, so do not oppose it. Let it stand for a moment in the quiet air and realize there is nothing left to guard. Then let it soften by itself. Think of stars remaining calm above a world that no longer needs explanation. Notice how nothing in that image argues with its own fading. In the same way, your body may become gentler without being told exactly how. A deeper calm moves through now, perhaps so quietly that it almost escapes notice. Another small measure of tension falls away. Another small cluster of thoughts loses shape. Another small inward holding becomes unnecessary. The night does not announce these changes, it only allows them. That is why this hour is so kind. It permits simplification. It permits drowsiness. It permits the lovely uncertainty where waking begins to loosen its claim. Let the hearing enter that uncertainty softly. Let a field resting after every footstep has ceased show you the way. It may grow quiet in layers, one layer after another. If the memory still feels slightly alert, meet that alertness with patience. There is no need for frustration here. The plateau has no frustration in it. The dark has no hurry in it. The wind does not demand efficiency from the grass, and the night does not demand efficiency from you. It only asks nothing, and in that asking nothing, something beautiful happens. The memory begins to understand that it may stop. It may release its last thin edge of insistence. Think of a path vanishing into blue darkness where no one needs to walk, and let the quiet in that image spread a little farther through you. Let that be true of the watchfulness now. It may become less exact and more peaceful. You do not need to force it towards sleep. Often the last thin edge of wakefulness loosens more easily when it is not opposed. So do not oppose it. Let it stand for a moment in the quiet air and realize there is nothing left to guard. Then let it soften by itself. Think of cloud shadow dissolving over a ridge at the close of day. Notice how nothing in that image argues with its own fading. In the same way, your watchfulness may become gentler without being told exactly how. A deeper calm moves through now, perhaps so quietly that it almost escapes notice. Another small measure of tension falls away. Another small cluster of thoughts loses shape. Another small inward holding becomes unnecessary. The night does not announce these changes. It only allows them. That is why this hour is so kind. It permits simplification. It permits drowsiness. It permits the lovely uncertainty where waking begins to loosen its claim. Let the time enter that uncertainty softly. Let mist lowering over open land show you the way. There is nothing for it to prove now. If the heart still feels slightly alert, meet that alertness with patience. There is no need for frustration here. The plateau has no frustration in it. The dark has no hurry in it. The wind does not demand efficiency from the grass, and the night does not demand efficiency from you. It only asks nothing, and in that asking nothing, something beautiful happens. The heart begins to understand that it may stop. It may become smaller without losing anything important. Think of water settling in a basin after the hand that stirred it has gone still, and let the quiet in that image spread a little farther through you. Let that be true of the awareness now. It may stop guarding what the night can hold better than it can. You do not need to force it towards sleep. Often the last thin edge of wakefulness loosens more easily when it is not opposed, so do not oppose it. Let it stand for a moment in the quiet air and realize there is nothing left to guard. Then, let it soften by itself. Think of a lamp growing lower in a safe room. Notice how nothing in that image argues with its own fading. In the same way, your awareness may become gentler without being told exactly how. A deeper calm moves through now, perhaps so quietly that it almost escapes notice. Another small measure of tension falls away. Another small cluster of thoughts loses shape. Another small inward holding becomes unnecessary. The night does not announce these changes, it only allows them. That is why this hour is so kind. It permits simplification. It permits drowsiness. It permits the lovely uncertainty where waking begins to loosen its claim. Let the drowsiness enter that uncertainty softly. Let grass bending and then standing quiet again after the wind passes show you the way. It may soften because no further effort is needed. If the breath still feels slightly alert, meet that alertness with patience. There is no need for frustration here. The plateau has no frustration in it. The dark has no hurry in it. The wind does not demand efficiency from the grass, and the night does not demand efficiency from you. It only asks nothing, and in that asking nothing, something beautiful happens. The breath begins to understand that it may stop. It may drift because the dark is wide enough to receive it. Think of stars remaining calm above a world that no longer needs explanation, and let the quiet in that image spread a little farther through you. Let that be true of the mind now. It may grow quiet in layers, one layer after another. You do not need to force it towards sleep. Often the last thin edge of wakefulness loosens more easily when it is not opposed. So do not oppose it. Let it stand for a moment in the quiet air and realize there is nothing left to guard. Then let it soften by itself. Think of a field resting after every footstep has ceased. Notice how nothing in that image argues with its own fading. In the same way, your mind may become gentler without being told exactly how. A deeper calm moves through now, perhaps so quietly that it almost escapes notice. Another small measure of tension falls away. Another small cluster of thoughts loses shape. Another small inward holding becomes unnecessary. The night does not announce these changes. It only allows them. That is why this hour is so kind. It permits simplification. It permits drowsiness. It permits the lovely uncertainty where waking begins to loosen its claim. Let the body enter that uncertainty softly. Let a path vanishing into blue darkness where no one needs to walk show you the way. It may release its last thin edge of insistence. If the hearing still feels slightly alert, meet that alertness with patience. There is no need for frustration here. The plateau has no frustration in it. The dark has no hurry in it. The wind does not demand efficiency from the grass, and the night does not demand efficiency from you. It only asks nothing. And in that asking nothing, something beautiful happens. The hearing begins to understand that it may stop. It may become less exact and more peaceful. Think of cloud shadow dissolving over a ridge at the close of day, and let the quiet in that image spread a little farther through you. Let that be true of the memory now. There is nothing for it to prove now. You do not need to force it towards sleep. Often the last thin edge of wakefulness loosens more easily when it is not opposed. So do not oppose it. Let it stand for a moment in the quiet air and realize there is nothing left to guard. Then let it soften by itself. Think of mist lowering over open land. Notice how nothing in that image argues with its own fading. In the same way, your memory may become gentler without being told exactly how. Now, even the need to notice your own breathing may begin to fade. The body can take care of that faithful rhythm by itself. The chest may rise without comment. The chest may fall without notice. The whole hidden system of life may continue its patient work while you drift farther from effort. This is how sleep often comes, not dramatically, with simplification, with the gentle disappearance of the unnecessary thought, the unnecessary alertness, the unnecessary wish to finish every inward sentence. What remains is enough. What remains is quiet. What remains is deep enough for rest. You do not need to hold the hour together. The sky is wide enough to receive every last tired fragment you no longer want to carry. The sky is wide enough to receive every last tired fragment you no longer want to carry. The sky is wide enough to receive every last tired fragment you no longer want to carry. The sky is wide enough to receive every last tired fragment you no longer want to carry. Now almost everything has become simple. There is no more study to carry. There is no more history to arrange. There is no more inward watch to keep. There is only the wide keeping over you. Only the soft support beneath you. Only the slow movement of breath that may soon be so quiet you hardly wish to notice it at all. This final section does not need to take you anywhere new. It only stays beside you, while sleep becomes easier. So rest beneath the wide keeping. Rest as though the night were kindly cupping the edges of your weariness and asking nothing in return. Rest as though every part of you had finally been told that duty is over for now. Rest as though the far world had loosened its claim and the near quiet had become the truest thing. Let rest come like water settling into stillness. You do not have to push yourself into that peace. Water does not argue itself into calm. Mist does not struggle to descend. A lamp does not resist its own dimness. In the same way, you may grow softer without any act of force. You may allow the body to feel heavy in the safest way. You may allow the mind to lose interest in holding itself awake. You may allow the soul to become quiet without needing to explain that quiet to anyone. There is nothing being demanded of you now, not clarity, not usefulness, not memory, not a well-formed prayer. Sometimes the kindest blessing at the end of a long day is simply covering from strain, covering from noise, covering from the needless inner brightness that keeps a tired mind standing long after it should have gone to rest. Think of a shepherded field grown quiet after the last motion has ceased. Let that image become a covering. You may simply receive its gentleness. If a stray thought rises, let it remain small. It does not need to become a road. It does not need to become a room with lights turned on inside it. It may be only a flicker and then a dim thing and then almost nothing at all. The wide keeping over you is larger than that thought. The night is deeper than that thought. The peace drawing near is kinder than that thought. Think of mist lowering over open ground. Let your whole inward life become as untroubled as that. Nothing in you has to hurry toward it. Let rest come like a river widening beyond stones. It comes best where effort is no longer insisting. Water does not argue itself into calm. Mist does not struggle to descend. A lamp does not resist its own dimness. In the same way, you may grow softer without any act of force. You may allow the body to feel heavy in the safest way. You may allow the mind to lose interest in holding itself awake. You may allow the soul to become quiet without needing to explain that quiet to anyone. There is nothing being demanded of you now. Not clarity, not usefulness, not memory, not a well-formed prayer. Sometimes the kindest blessing at the end of a long day is simply covering from strain, covering from noise, covering from the needless inner brightness that keeps a tired mind standing long after it should have gone to rest. Think of a lamp going low in a room that is safe. Let that image become a covering. It is enough to become softer by degrees. If a stray thought rises, let it remain small. It does not need to become a road. It does not need to become a room with lights turned on inside it. It may be only a flicker and then a dim thing and then almost nothing at all. The wide keeping over you is larger than that thought. The night is deeper than that thought. The peace drawing near is kinder than that thought. Think of a child loosening in sleep while still being held. Let your whole inward life become as untroubled as that. The night may do the larger work for you now. Let rest come like a blanket of dark laid gently over the high land. Rest does not need your performance. Water does not argue itself into calm. Mist does not struggle to descend. A lamp does not resist its own dimness. In the same way, you may grow softer without any act of force. You may allow the body to feel heavy in the safest way. You may allow the mind to lose interest in holding itself awake. You may allow the soul to become quiet without needing to explain that quiet to anyone. There is nothing being demanded of you now. Not clarity, not usefulness, not memory, not a well-formed prayer. Sometimes the kindest blessing at the end of a long day is simply covering from strain, covering from noise, covering from the needless inner brightness that keeps a tired mind standing long after it should have gone to rest. Think of a calm pool receiving the moon without trembling. Let that image become a covering. Mercy knows how to lower itself over tiredness. If a stray thought rises, let it remain small. It does not need to become a road. It does not need to become a room with lights turned on inside it. It may be only a flicker, and then a dim thing, and then almost nothing at all. The wide keeping over you is larger than that thought. The night is deeper than that thought. The peace drawing near is kinder than that thought. Think of water settling into stillness. Let your whole inward life become as untroubled as that. You do not have to push yourself into that peace. Let rest come like a shepherded field grown quiet after the last motion has ceased. You may simply receive its gentleness. Water does not argue itself into calm. Mist does not struggle to descend. A lamp does not resist its own dimness. In the same way, you may grow softer without any act of force. You may allow the body to feel heavy in the safest way. You may allow the mind to lose interest in holding itself awake. You may allow the soul to become quiet without needing to explain that quiet to anyone. There is nothing being demanded of you now. Not clarity, not usefulness, not memory, not a well-formed prayer. Sometimes the kindest blessing at the end of a long day is simply covering from strain, covering from noise, covering from the needless inner brightness that keeps a tired mind standing long after it should have gone to rest. Think of mist lowering over open ground. Let that image become a covering. Nothing in you has to hurry toward it. If a stray thought rises, let it remain small. It does not need to become a road. It does not need to become a room with lights turned on inside it. It may be only a flicker, and then a dim thing, and then almost nothing at all. The wide keeping over you is larger than that thought. The night is deeper than that thought. The peace drawing near is kinder than that thought. Think of a river widening beyond stones. Let your whole inward life become as untroubled as that. It comes best where effort is no longer insisting. Let rest come like a lamp going low in a room that is safe. It is enough to become softer by degrees. Water does not argue itself into calm. Mist does not struggle to descend. A lamp does not resist its own dimness. In the same way, you may grow softer without any act of force. You may allow the body to feel heavy in the safest way. You may allow the mind to lose interest in holding itself awake. You may allow the soul to become quiet without needing to explain that quiet to anyone. There is nothing being demanded of you now. Not clarity, not usefulness, not memory, not a well-formed prayer. Sometimes the kindest blessing at the end of a long day is simply covering. Covering from strain, covering from noise, covering from the needless inner brightness that keeps a tired mind standing long after it should have gone to rest. Think of a child loosening in sleep while still being held. Let that image become a covering. The night may do the larger work for you now. If a stray thought rises, let it remain small. It does not need to become a road. It does not need to become a room with lights turned on inside it. It may be only a flicker, and then a dim thing, and then almost nothing at all. The wide keeping over you is larger than that thought. The night is deeper than that thought. The peace drawing near is kinder than that thought. Think of a blanket of dark laid gently over the high land. Let your whole inward life become as untroubled as that. Rest does not need your performance. Let rest come like a calm pool receiving the moon without trembling. Mercy knows how to lower itself over tiredness. Water does not argue itself into calm. Mist does not struggle to descend. A lamp does not resist its own dimness. In the same way, you may grow softer without any act of force. You may allow the body to feel heavy in the safest way. You may allow the mind to lose interest in holding itself awake. You may allow the soul to become quiet without needing to explain that quiet to anyone. There is nothing being demanded of you now. Not clarity, not usefulness, not memory, not a well-formed prayer. Sometimes the kindest blessing at the end of a long day is simply covering. Covering from strain, covering from noise, covering from the needless inner brightness that keeps a tired mind standing long after it should have gone to rest. Think of water settling into stillness. Let that image become a covering. You do not have to push yourself into that peace. If a stray thought rises, let it remain small. It does not need to become a road. It does not need to become a room with lights turned on inside it. It may be only a flicker, and then a dim thing, and then almost nothing at all. The wide keeping over you is larger than that thought. The night is deeper than that thought. The peace drawing near is kinder than that thought. Think of a shepherded field, grown quiet, after the last motion has ceased. Let your whole inward life become as untroubled as that. You may simply receive its gentleness. Let rest come like mist lowering over open ground. Nothing in you has to hurry toward it. Water does not argue itself into calm. Mist does not struggle to descend. A lamp does not resist its own dimness. In the same way, you may grow softer without any act of force. You may allow the body to feel heavy in the safest way. You may allow the mind to lose interest in holding itself awake. You may allow the soul to become quiet without needing to explain that quiet to anyone. There is nothing being demanded of you now. Not clarity, not usefulness, not memory, not a well-formed prayer. Sometimes the kindest blessing at the end of a long day is simply covering. Covering from strain, covering from noise, covering from the needless inner brightness that keeps a tired mind standing long after it should have gone to rest. Think of a river widening beyond stones. Let that image become a covering. It comes best where effort is no longer insisting. If a stray thought rises, let it remain small. It does not need to become a road. It does not need to become a room with lights turned on inside it. It may be only a flicker and then a dim thing and then almost nothing at all. The wide keeping over you is larger than that thought. The night is deeper than that thought. The peace drawing near is kinder than that thought. Think of a lamp going low in a room that is safe. Let your whole inward life become as untroubled as that. It is enough to become softer by degrees. Let rest come, like a child loosening in sleep while still being held. The night may do the larger work for you now. Water does not argue itself into calm. Mist does not struggle to descend. A lamp does not resist its own dimness. In the same way, you may grow softer without any act of force. You may allow the body to feel heavy in the safest way. You may allow the mind to lose interest in holding itself awake. You may allow the soul to become quiet without needing to explain that quiet to anyone. There is nothing being demanded of you now. Not clarity, not usefulness, not memory, not a well-formed prayer. Sometimes the kindest blessing at the end of a long day is simply covering. Covering from strain. Covering from noise. Covering from the needless inner brightness that keeps a tired mind standing long after it should have gone to rest. Think of a blanket of dark laid gently over the high land. Let that image become a covering. Rest does not need your performance. May the forehead be smooth and unworried. May the eyes remain quiet behind their darkness. May the jaw forget its old effort. May the throat stay easy and open. May the shoulders sink away from burden. May the hands remain empty and still. May the chest trust its breathing. May the stomach release its last small knot. May the back feel supported. May the legs grow calm and heavy. May the feet stop traveling. May unfinished things remain unfinished until morning without troubling you now. May unspoken things rest without pressing for speech. May unsolved things loosen their grip. May tomorrow keep its distance. May this hour belong only to rest. May sleep come under blessing. May sleep come under mercy. May sleep come under the shepherding dark that does not lose what it covers. May sleep come under the still water peace that does not tremble once it has settled. May sleep come under the hand of the God who does not need your wakefulness in order to keep you through the night. So go softly now. Go lightly now. Go down into rest now. The long study is over. The quiet remains. The keeping remains. You may sleep, rest, stay here, where quiet is enough, and where enough is gentle enough to become sleep.